What's up, comrades? Welcome back to the Vanguard, and welcome back to Zach and I, because we literally just got back to Kansas City less than an hour ago, like fucking 30 minutes ago. Got back from our little road trip shooting our first ever van documentary. So super excited to announce some details about that a little bit later in the show. But yeah, what's up, everyone? Hit that like button if you're just tuning in. Welcome back to the Vanguard. We have an awesome stream for you guys today, a super juicy stream just filled to the max with insane drama, confrontation, everything you want from a good Vanguard live stream. But yeah, thank you all for tuning into today's show. How you doing, Zach?
Fucking great, man. Yeah, we just got back in town. It was, not a terrible drive, right? Pretty easy going, not too bad as far as road trips are concerned. Kind of fun. No headaches, which was awesome. And yeah, coming back with a bang. Thought about going live on the road, but things were just too crazy. We were, spread thin as it is. So, super excited to be able to talk about it. And yeah, this is an episode of bangers right here. We've got left on left beef. We've got election analysis. We've got a fucking super chat already. Shout out to you, Stacy Schlelman. Made it to a live stream. Shout out to you. We're stoked you're here. We're stoked everyone's here. It's going to be an awesome stream. Going to get to dunk on Vosh a little bit. Always love to do that here at the Vanguard. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff coming up. Everything good on your end, Gavin?
Yeah, just try leaving and re-entering the stream, Zach. Sounds like your audio is a little bit fucked up today.
Okay, yeah, because you're coming in and out of focus too. So I don't know if it's both of us or what's going on, but we can both try leaving and coming back.
Well, okay. Hopefully I'm not out of focus. I look fine on my end. But thank you, Stacy, by the way, for the $9.99 first super chat of the live stream. Really appreciate that, Stacy. Finally made it to a live stream. We're glad you're here. And awesome. Thank you guys so much for everyone tuning in today and leaving comments. We're about to get into today's show as soon as Zach shows back up. Hopefully we don't have any internet issues. How you doing, Zach? Am I looking okay?
Yeah, for whatever reason, you were just coming in like pixelated. I imagine that was the same time that I was having audio for you, but we should be good now. I think everything looks good to me.
Dope. Thank you, Rain, for letting us know that everything looks good. And yeah, do you want to just dive right in, Zach, to the main topic for today, which is this confrontation on the Young Turks between Briahna Joy Gray and Cenk Uygur himself?
Yeah, dude, we've kind of been counting this down since we had the great pleasure of having Briahna on our show just a few days before this was, I think actually the day before, or maybe the night that it was taped. I'm not sure. Either way, we were talking to her about it and we were like, oh shit, this is going to be a banger. And honestly, I did not think it was going to be as crazy as it is. There's a lot to unpack here. So yeah, let's just plow right into this.
Absolutely. And before we do, don't want to forget a huge shout out to our patron community. Thank you guys so much. Particularly, Zach and I are feeling extra thankful because, as I said, we just got back from our road trip to Minneapolis. And that trip was made 100% possible by our patron community. Our first ever van documentary, the first piece of documentary content that we'll be bringing you guys later this month, just to reiterate, was made 100% possible by our patron community. We would not have been able to afford to embark on the journey were it not for the donations of our patrons. So thank you guys so much. We really appreciate your support. If you'd like to help us out, then hit up that link in the description. Really great way to help the show. We would not be able to do it without you guys. So thank you so much. And as I said, links in the description if you'd like to have a spot of your own up there on the shout out screen, patreon.com/The Vanguard channel. But yeah, let's get right into the fucking gutter, guys. Briahna Joy Gray and Cenk Uygur finally having a confrontation after Cenk called Bri a fake leftist not even that long ago, maybe a couple months ago. So we reported on that at the time. I thought Cenk was a little bit out of line for making those comments in the first place. But I was interested to see this conversation. I genuinely was. These are two people that are both very they have both, have very strong opinions. They're both very opinionated people, and they're both very passionate about said opinions. So I was excited to finally see the clash take place. And it happened. I think last night they released this clip. So super excited to dive in. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, we were watching this for the first time as we drove home. And guys, you're going to want to buckle up for this because typically when, people meet after there's been some like incendiary comments, it can they can use it as a time to really, join forces in good faith and just like be civil and talk about the issues. And it seems to me that at least that Cenk has something else on his mind that's eating at him throughout this entire fucking interview. Anyway, let's hit play and we'll talk along as it goes.
All right, welcome to the conversation where we're gonna have a doozy today. Could be, well, let's see how it goes. Briahna Joy Gray is the host of the Bad Faith podcast. She's co-host on The Rising. She's also a host on Debrief on Call-In, former National Press Secretary for Bernie Sanders in 2020. And we're gonna try to clear the air today in terms of what folks believe, what I believe, what she believes, what everybody believes. So this ought to be interesting. Briahna, welcome.
Thanks, Cenk. I appreciate you having me.
No problem. So let's keep it real right out of the gate. Some have called you the fake left, including me. Now, I'll tell you why I called you that, and then you tell me why I'm wrong, okay? So it seemed that you had an alliance, which I don't know if you still have or not, and were like-minded with other fake leftists, like Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Tulsi Gabbard. First, Tulsi Gabbard hosting Tucker Carlson's show on Friday. Do you still think that they have good intent and that they are not fake left, that they just happen to just pummel the left and agree with the right wing all the time, just coincidentally? I'm just curious what your take on that is, Slave.
I didn't catch it. I've never actually met or spoken to or corresponded with Tulsi Gabbard. I don't really have a relationship with her. Like a lot of people on the left, I really appreciated her standing up for Bernie in 2016. But honestly, haven't really followed her much since. So, I think part of my frustration is the characterization of me having an alliance with people that
So right off the bat, a little bit of a weird way to start trying to tie Briahna Joy Gray to Tulsi Gabbard when she was literally the press secretary for a candidate running against Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard's never been on the Bad Faith podcast, to my knowledge. I don't think these people have really ever interacted, let alone in a positive light. So just to come right out of the gate with like, you're guilty by association because of Tulsi Gabbard, someone that Briahna doesn't even seemingly know about or care about or defend ever, often, if ever. So just an interesting way to start this interview. And obviously, Briahna Joy Gray is not above criticisms. We've been critical sometimes of her commentary here at the Vanguard. We got into a little bit of a debate the other day when she was on the show. But, of all things to start with, I really do find it odd to just go full on guilt by association. You are allied with Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald and Tulsi Gabbard. It's like, it's not a very substantive criticism. It's, again, just kind of guilt by association, which generally I don't think is a very intellectually honest way to go about criticizing someone. People do this all the time with Kyle Kulinski because he goes on Joe Rogan. Like, people in Kyle's fan base will say, Kyle's a fake leftist because he's not critical enough of Joe Rogan and he goes on to Joe Rogan's show. It's like, who fucking cares? Man, like, you can talk to whoever you want. I don't really give a shit about that. Unless you're literally just having people on to do softball interviews with them. I don't care if someone talks to Glenn Greenwald or Joe Rogan or anyone. I don't care if someone talks to Cenk Uygur, because obviously this problem exists on the other side of the spectrum too, where if someone, goes on TYT once, like, for example, Chris Smalls, president of the Amazon Labor Union, he recently went on TYT, and a bunch of fucking losers on Twitter started saying Chris Smalls is a sellout. Chris Smalls is a sellout because he went on Hassan Piker's show and TYT and all he cares about is being a celebrity. Fuck you. Chris Smalls is not guilty by association for going on TYT. That's fucking ridiculous. The dude's going to go wherever he can. In the same way, someone's not guilty by association, but for going on Joe Rogan or having a conversation with Glenn Greenwald. I just hate this stupid line of logic. It's so dumb and it's so lazy.
100%. And it's always the same people that are like, Jimmy can go on Tucker's show because he's reaching the right wing. And it's like, oh, the second that, somebody who's an actual activist, an actual union organizer goes on the show that you don't like, it's like, oh, now that's a problem. It's so fucking petty and ridiculous. And I think another point that, we'll continue to find as he goes throughout this entire interview is the guilt by association point that you just mentioned, right? And for all that everybody wants to talk about, it's like, oh, people just want to talk about drama these days. We're above that here at networks like TYT, or people just care about slamming and dunking on everybody. We're above that at networks like TYT. It seems like in this 1 hour that he has Briahna Joy Gray here, he cannot get away for even 1 second his personal, petty ass beefs with people that cloud his judgment on every single issue. And whenever Briahna Joy Gray tries to dispute that, he just, pivots back in. So we're going to see a lot of this. But yeah, completely ridiculous to start with somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, and that's the other big part of this is that, I don't have my fucking plug right now. That's why. Is it fucking bad?
Oh, your audio just sounds a little weird, but it's fine.
Okay. Anyway, all I was saying is that, and chat, let me know if I'm not like fucking discernible. But all I was saying is that, through all the talk and all the commentary of how like, nobody wants to, we just need to remove like petty personal disagreements from the left. It's like, no, that's not what you're interested in doing. You're interested in your narcissistic game, Cenk, and that's why you had this person on to ask her about a bunch of different people that are not her. But anyway, let's keep watching.
Really think about, much less, have a relationship with. I do have a relationship with Glenn. He was my boss at The Intercept. He's been supportive of me throughout my career. I think he's obviously very bright and thoughtful. And when we agree, we agree. And I find that he's one of the best advocates for whatever it is that we agree on. When we disagree, I have him on my show and we talk about it. And I have brought up some of the criticisms to him directly that people have about whether or not he pushes back sufficiently hard. But he goes on Tucker Carlson and other similar shows. We probably will continue to disagree about how one should best handle those types of situations. But I think there's a lot of room on the left for a lot of different people advocating for a lot of overlapping interests. And I'm happy to be a part of that.
Okay, so that's an interesting answer and a good answer. And guys, let me clarify.
Also, shout out to you, Brian. Thanks so much for the $4.99. Cenk's dismissive attitude towards Kyle, Crystal Hedges, and Cornel West supporting Force the Vote is a real tell about his own extreme arrogance. Yeah, well, I don't want to spoil my opinion on that section of this interview, but when we get to it, I'll definitely be commenting on that because I do agree with you, Brian.
The entire interview, his attitude throughout this entire conversation, I think, is a real fucking tell about his own extreme arrogance in the way that he frames every single issue through the eyes of Cenk Uygur and his own personal experience there. It's very honestly, it's very Trumpian, right? In the way that he kind of comes across in this. Like Trump, you can always tell his personal feelings about an individual contribute massively into how he analyzes a situation, and I think you're seeing that here 100% with Cenk Uygur.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you also, Christian, for the $2. He calls her a bad faith actor, but it was the opposite. That's funny. Yeah, like I said, don't want to spoil too much of my opinion. So let's keep watching. But thank you so much, Christian. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
From the beginning as well, that I wouldn't have Jimmy Dore on this show. I think he's a total fraud and gets all of his money from the right wing and is one of the worst people in media. But Briahna is on the show because we're going to actually have a real conversation where we figure out what our opinions are instead of yelling at each other through other people, etc. online. So obviously, I think that you might have good faith, and I'm also being honest and saying might. Okay, so let's actually talk. And I've read some of your pieces, Briahna, that I totally agreed with. So let's get into what you think. I might come back to the Jimmys of the world, but I might not. But I hear you, and that's already an important clarification that you don't view it as a quote unquote alliance, whatever that means. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what do you mean by that, Cenk?
I think Jimmy is an obvious right winger now. He does these idiotic, videos about. Hold on. Let me explain. You asked the question and about how the vaccine. He's skeptical of it because he's making money off that. Earlier, he was doing pro-vaccine videos.
I wasn't asking about Jimmy. My question was about what you mean. What do you mean about me? Since we're here. I mean, I really do think you probably should
that's
have
what I
Jimmy
was
on the show
getting
and
to.
talk to him about Jimmy. But what do you mean when you characterize me and Jimmy or me and whomever as having a quote unquote alliance?
Because in the days where he was doing Force the Vote and all that nonsense, and then we had a blow up with him over things that happened here, and I saw you and Katie Halper and Glenn Greenwald and all those folks constantly supporting Jimmy, and I thought, well, that's mental. So that's what I meant by it. But you're saying you're not necessarily allied with him.
Well, Cenk,
I was going to take that at face value.
Well, I firmly believe in Force the Vote, and I support Force the Vote, as did Cornel West and Chris Hedges and Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske and a whole lot of people on the left, a lot of members of DSA and the chapter that
Watch Jink's face during this too. Like she's making a really good point here, and it's almost like he's a kid. Like, Cornell West? Who the fuck is that? Who the fuck is that? Kyle Kalinske, former member of my very own network. Who the fuck is that? Who cares about him?
support Force the Vote, as did Cornell West and Chris Hedges and Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske and a whole lot of people on the left, a lot of members of
Like he's posing for thumbnails for the Vanguard.
Pretty much. And again, like, guys, there's very legitimate criticisms of Jimmy Dore. I think it is very fair to say, I think it's undeniable that he panders to the right wing more and more and more and more these days. That's something that we're very honest about and take a lot of shit for saying, but it's just true. Like, it's obvious. So that there are criticisms of Jimmy Dore that are very valid. Force the Vote is not one of them. Force the Vote is like the least valid reason ever to criticize Jimmy Dore. You guys might remember back when we made more like quote unquote pro Jimmy Dore content back in the day. Why was that? That's because Force the Vote was going on, and that's what the conversation was about. And we totally agreed with Jimmy about that. We thought it was a brilliant idea. We thought it was 100% understandable to get frustrated by the fact that they were being, completely shunned by the Congress members, the squad members, the people that should have been forcing the vote but decided not to because they were cowards and didn't want to challenge Nancy Pelosi. They didn't want to challenge the orthodoxy of their own party leadership. Force the Vote was a great idea. And again, with every criticism of Jimmy Dore that is valid, it just blows my mind that that's the first one you go to. Oh, that Force the Vote nonsense. Can't believe you were defending him during that time. It's like, bro, Cenk, that's ridiculous. Come on. Force the Vote was a great idea. And if Jimmy Dore had still been part of TYT when he, decided to go with it, then you would have thought the same thing as well.
100%. And I just want to add, he for a guy that's so into like machismo, right? Like he's on multiple occasions threatened to take off his shirt and fight Joe Rogan, right? Like, I mean, this guy is like such a, oh yeah, I'm a rah, big tough guy, right? But yet he refuses to have any of the men that he's or any of these other people on that he, actually seemingly has a much more like fucking vindictive streak towards, much more like fucking, just real anger with, like a beef, you know what I'm saying? And yet he's completely unwilling to do that. And he tries to brush it off as something other than cowardice. He's like, oh, these people are bad faith. He's like, these people aren't here to have a real argument. So there's no reason for me to debate with them. But Cenk, your own fucking history, you like to tout that you've been doing this for 20 years. Well, that gives us 20 years to pull up all your boo-boos, right, Cenk? And I remember when you were running for Congress not that long ago, right? Gavin and I aren't that old, but we've been covering this long enough to remember that, right? And you were running against Christy Smith. And one of the things that they tried to smear you and slander you for, that Gavin and I defended you for, was when you successfully debated David Duke, right? A fucking vile, disgusting, racist, any fucking ism that's fucking deplorable, bigoted related. That is what David Duke is. He is dirt on all of our shoes. Cenk agrees with that. Everybody agrees with that, unless you're also dirt under your shoe. Okay. And you had him on to debate, and I said, of course, he has every right to have this guy on. It wasn't like he had him on for tea, right? They debated, like they fucking argued, of course. I mean, Cenk is a fucking brown dude. Obviously, they fucking beefed. And I was like, of course, he's going to fucking do that. He has the First Amendment, right? He has his own platform. But you can't turn around and tell me that you think David Duke is a better faith actor with fucking straight eyes than fucking Glenn Greenwald. Are you fucking kidding me? Nobody, you've immediately obliterated the fucking argument. So unless you want to start walking back, which you say later in your interview that you never walk back anything that TYT's ever done and TYT's never changed an ounce and all this kind of shit. Okay. Well, then you're being massively inconsistent here, and you're showing that you're a coward and that you don't actually want to debate these guys and that you're afraid of losing. And that's why you came on to try and treat Briahna like a fucking punching bag instead of having the stones to actually talk to the dudes that you disagreed with. It's fucking bullshit. And it shows his massive ego. But we can keep watching.
Yeah, he treats it like this whole interview like it's a proxy war with Jimmy Dore. It's like, bro, Briahna is not like, again, you can criticize her. She's not above criticism, but I just think it's so dumb to try to act just like she's oh, you're Jimmy Dore, but a female or something, or you're Jimmy Dore's fucking spokesperson. Like, what? Has she ever even had him on Bad Faith? I don't think he's ever been on her show.
I just Googled it. He's never been on Bad Faith. She's been on Jim. I don't even know if she's been on Jimmy Dore's show. This is such a wild stretch. It's like, oh, the same people that listen to her show and hate my show also like Jimmy's show. So I'm pissed off at her. Like, go fuck yourself, guys. Sometimes the world's cruel. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it's crazy that he really just seemingly didn't even do his homework and familiarize himself with the content of Brianna's, show and her channel. And this is what he's going with. It's very bizarre. Thank you, Christina, for the $4.99. So Cenk had Briahna on his show to have a fight with Jimmy Dore. Pathetic. Yeah, like I said, it's a proxy war. It's a proxy war. Anyway, let's keep watching.
DSA and the chapter that I used to belong to, a lot of people across the left spectrum really understood that it's really important to force a vote on various issues to expose folks who only performatively believe in various things. And I've seen you yourself talk since then about how important it is to get people to go ahead and vote for various issues that they, as Democrats, often espouse, but at the end of the day, hide behind whether that's parliamentarian or other kind of procedural factors to disguise the extent to which that they actually don't want to follow through on some of these policies because their donor base won't allow them to. So yes, I did and continue to believe in force the vote. It was frustrating to me that we weren't able to have a conversation at the time because it seemed like a lot of the pushback against force the vote had to do with a mistaken belief that Kevin McCarthy could be Speaker of the House, which of course was wrong and debunked and was promulgated by a lot of folks. And it could have been easily cleared up without a lot of the animus that ended up coming out of that moment. And I really appreciate that Sam Cedar was willing to come on Bad Faith Podcast and have a prolonged.
I like how you can literally hear Cenk like coping and seething through the mic in the background.
Yeah, it's rude as fuck, and he's intentionally doing it. It's massively unprofessional, but anyway.
Civilized conversation about it that I think ultimately had the potential to move us all forward instead of dividing the left community.
Okay, look, I didn't do a good job of starting this conversation off on the right foot, which I wanted to, but now that we're off on the wrong foot, something you just said really got under my skin, and it's something that you've mischaracterized before. You said since then about force the vote, as if I've changed my mind. I've been challenging the Democratic establishment for 20 straight years here. So the idea that like these Johnny-come-latelys come in and go, oh my God, we had this amazing idea. What if we challenge the Democrats to have a vote? That's the oldest thing in the book. And then you guys like pretend like you came up with it. And then there's all this talk about like change politics at TYT that's mental, not supported by one shred of evidence. And you did that on your show with Jordan Sheridan. What do you mean change politics? Change politics how? What are you talking about?
And with all due respect, I'm really confused. I certainly didn't mean to take any credit away from the work that you've been doing in the left community for a very long time. So many people who listen to my show talk about how they were onboarded to the left because of watching shows like TYT, which at the time were, really unique in the breadtube space, really defined what it means to be a leftist on YouTube. So I don't think this should be a conversation about who gets credit for what. For me personally, I didn't care who came up with force the vote. I actually heard of the idea first from watching Sam Cedar show. And he mentioned that there was an idea that he thought was a good idea that came from Jimmy Dore. And that's what perked my ears up because I knew that there was some friction there between those two. And I thought, wow, if Sam is willing to say this about an idea that he heard about from Jimmy Dore, which of course Jimmy Dore didn't invent either. And he says this very openly, that he got it from the DSA, that it was a tactic that was listed in the 2019 DSA kind of strategic document. And of course, like in the context of force the vote, we always talked about how this was a model that was used by suffragettes rather, in the early part of the last century, that having people vote on bills, even as they were voted down, really ginned up a lot of public interest in women's equality and those kinds of things. So yeah, I certainly don't think we as a left community should be talking about credit or who's first or anything like that. I think the goal should be for us to come together and try to figure out the best way strategically to go forward. But it's difficult to do that when people are so bogged down in their interpersonal animuses. And that's part of why I wanted to come here today to really talk about why there seems to be so much negative energy.
I just want to point out that he was so rude and like so caustic when he pitched that to her, and she tries to return it in like such a soft and kind way. And it's like, of course, Cenk, you were a trailblazer in this space, and we do all owe a little bit to TYT, and now we're all here and we're all thinking with our own heads, and let's talk about this shit and let's get away from personal animosity. And then he's like, oh yeah, 100%. Let me just plow back into my personal animosity.
So true. And thank you, Brian, for the $4.99. Cenk supports the US proxy war with Russia and Ukraine, so it's not surprising he's fighting a proxy war with Jimmy, using Briahna as his target. Yeah, well, they get into that as well. And extra explosive segment of this debate. They get into the whole Russia and the gray zone and all that stuff. So excited to break that down. But thank you again for the super chat, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to see you in the chat, Brian. Really appreciate it. As for you, Victor, Bri is the best communicator I've ever heard. LOL, she could be arguing flat earth and it would be convincing. We actually talked about that the other day. There's no doubt in your mind that this woman is a lawyer. Her and Glenn are like the two most ferocious fucking debaters I've ever talked to, just because they don't even change their demeanor at all. They just you know, they come at you like fucking prosecution. And it's impressive.
Yeah, and to all the people saying Bri destroyed Gavin in the debate, you try fucking debating a lawyer. You try debating a fucking Harvard educated lawyer, motherfucker. I think I did a pretty good job considering the circumstances. But anyway,
you did a good job. Everybody thought that I was too much of a fan. We all got our criticism around the board.
But yeah, thank you so much, Victor. Really appreciate that. And thank you, Boeing 757. Really appreciate that, Boeing. Then why didn't you support Force the Vote? It is so basic and so obvious that the best thing to do is to get something for giving your vote. Yeah, exactly correct, Boeing. Exactly correct. And I think Cenk's about to lay out exactly why he didn't support Force the Vote, which is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, he tries to stack it up like it's going to be this like grand revelation to everybody that supported Force the Vote, and then I'll let you guys judge for yourself.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Boeing. Really appreciate that. Thank you also, Bookworm Skates, for the $1.99. Bri eating a big bowl of joke yogurt. Well, that's a little bit more kind of a name than chunk yogurt, which is what people usually call him, but that's pretty funny.
Gavin,
so
white male Gavin attacks.
But we have to break that down, because I'll tell you exactly how the history of that went. So Jimmy, at the time, we're still friends. No bad blood has happened at all, other than old stuff from TYT. And at the time, I didn't know the old stuff from TYT. So he calls me up, force a vote. I say, okay, that's, as a general thing, forcing a vote, perfectly great. On Medicare for all, perfectly great. Then later, I ask, hey, we're going to force it, and then what happens? Like, who is there a progressive that's going to run against Nancy Pelosi? Because if there's no progressive, what are we doing? Making Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House? What earthly difference would it make? He's just as conservative as Nancy Pelosi. And Jimmy didn't have an answer for that. None of you ever have an answer for that. And we're going to hold on. Let me explain the whole thing. And then, okay, we're going to go for Medicare for all. But wait a minute, there's a ton of things that are lower hanging fruit. And if you're going to go and do a spectacular force to vote, that's a big action. Let's try to get something that we can actually get. Medicare for all is not even on the agenda. I hate that it's not on the agenda, but I know what's doable and doable and not doable. And at the time, idiots like Aaron Monte are like, oh, $15 minimum wage, that's already in the bag. We don't need to do that. And I'm like, wait, if you guys are gonna be juvenile and you don't know how any of politics works, and you have no earthly idea how in the world you're gonna get Medicare for all to pass, let alone things like $15 minimum wage, and you don't have an alternative to Pelosi, then why am I wasting my time? But I didn't say that publicly. I said in a very gentle way, I don't think this is a good strategy. Then Jimmy blows up and goes nuclear and attacks us viciously for no goddamn reason. So when he does that, don't come at me and say, hey, there's a personal animus issue here. Well, you're in that fight, your ally came in and nuked everyone. Everyone, Ryan Grimm, David Sirota, the best progressives in the country. He nukes them and he goes, what? What's with the personal animus?
So I am not accusing you of having personal animus. I think it's an accurate description. You called Aaron Monte an idiot. You've had your feelings about Jimmy Dore out on the table. I personally would prefer not to make those characterize people that way.
And to be fair, yeah, Cenk and Jimmy both do engage in personal animus to an unproductive extent, in my opinion. I actually do agree with some of the criticisms of Jimmy Dore's behavior and the way he conducted himself around the time when Force the Vote was all going down. I do think he was, unnecessarily caustic and probably unnecessarily burned a few bridges in the process of what should have just been a civil debate about strategy. And generally, I do think that Jimmy kind of does that, plays up that drama and those agreements for clicks and for money. I think that's pretty undeniable. That's pretty obvious. But again, Cenk does it too. He just did it to, Aaron Mate, and he's doing it to Briahna right now, essentially. It's obvious that he has personal animus too, and that it clearly affects the way he covers things. It's pretty clear that, again, like I said, he would have supported Force the Vote if it weren't for that personal animus towards Jimmy Dore, and if Jimmy was still on TYT. I think that's obvious. I think that's undeniable. And as for the substance of Cenk's critique, Force the Vote, I couldn't disagree more. I think it's ridiculous to say that, because Medicare for all is not part of the agenda, it's not worth fighting for. That's why it is worth fighting for you. Like, that is literally the point of doing Force the Vote, because it's not part of the Biden agenda, but it's something the country desperately needed. And way to do that than hold up Nancy Pelosi's, dream job of becoming Speaker of House once again. That's a very intelligent way to go about it, because again, it's something the media is actually going to cover. When you're talking about, holding Nancy Pelosi's speakership hostage, that's a sexy story. Everyone knows who Nancy Pelosi is. Even non-political people are going to be a little bit interested when they see that head. And then what do they find out about? Well, they hear about Medicare for all and the vote and the advocacy, and it gets the conversation going around this policy, which again really fell off, unfortunately, after the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign ended. So it would have been to re-inject the conversation about Medicare for all into the discourse. It would have been a great way to, raise awareness about the fact that we're one of the only developed countries, if not the developed country, that doesn't offer our citizens universal health care, especially, atrocious during a pandemic where, hundreds of thousands of people are dying. So, for those reasons, I thought Force the Vote was obviously a good idea. So yeah, that's the substantive rebuttal I have to Jake on that part.
Yeah, he also is just straight up lying in order to make himself seem better in retrospect. I imagine that this is like the most compelling argument that he's crafted in his mind for why he was opposed to Force the Vote in retrospect. But we all know the real reason, right? It was because he was being a petulant, pouty little boy that did not want to give credit to somebody that was, going away from his network and taking views away from him, and sure was caustic and rude and shitty, just like he's been caustic and rude and shitty 45 times in the first 10 minutes of this entire exchange that we've watched. And I just wanted to throw this tweet up on the screen because he's, as Briahna Joy Gray is debunking his primary talking point. He attempts to deny that this was a talking point that was consistently trotted out by TYT and the likes of Sam Cedar throughout this entire time. It took me all of 30 seconds to Google Cenk, Uygur, Kevin McCarthy, Force the Vote, and a bunch of shit comes up, both from their main channel and this tweet, but this one pretty much says it all, guys. So don't let Cenk gaslight you into making you think he's always been consistent, because he hasn't. He does exactly what every other commentator does when they have a large platform, which is they double and triple down until you forget, and then they slightly change their mind. Anyway, he says challenging progressives to defy Democratic leadership and force a vote on hashtag Medicare for all is so obvious. I've been pushing for it for 2 years. The question is what you push on. The one where you hand the speaker position to GOP without any plan is not the one. And then, actually come back down to give fucking Jimmy Dore and Professor Zinkus their fucking credit for being completely right over here. Sorry, Cenk Uygur is misleading his audience again. If Pelosi doesn't get enough votes, it doesn't get, quote, handed to the GOP. That's not how it works at all. He's gaslighting everyone now and running interference for the Democratic Party. Don't fall for it. And obviously, we know it would go to Hakeem Jeffries, who, of course, is a Democrat, even though he's a shitty Democrat. Obviously, Nancy Pelosi is a fucking shitty Democrat. So anyway.
Also, the point, Hakeem Jeffries never had any chance of becoming speaker either. Nancy Pelosi was never going to let anyone take that role from her, which is why it was the perfect point of leverage. In my opinion, there has not been a better point of leverage since Force the Vote. There really hasn't, because again, Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to lose her role as speakership. And she definitely doesn't want to lose it publicly in this big intra-party battle with the progressive faction, the left flank of her own party. She was never going to give that up, which again is why it was the perfect leverage point to get some concessions. It's so obvious. And the fact that we have to explain this to Cenk Uygur, who's been doing our job for 20 years, is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it goes on to say he has the exact same problem as Nancy Pelosi, right? Which obviously the reason she would never let Hakeem Jeffries become speaker, even if it meant, undermining or doing something that she thought was politically valuable to her or politically essential, is that her own ego would get in the way. These people have money. Money doesn't do it for people anymore like that. Nancy Pelosi has a fucking $100,000 refrigerator or whatever the fuck we found out about. You know what I'm saying? She needs power. She needs that. And to her, and just like Trump, right? Because this is, not to compare everybody to Trump, but it's true, right? The powerful people in this fucking country, their ego is what they fucking have. Cenk is showing here that his ego is what he fucking has too. That's why, he's not one of us. But anyway.
Also, thank you so much, Stacy, for the $4.99. Gavin, you were fantastic with Bree. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad you found that conversation productive and interesting, and I'm glad you think that I held my own. It was definitely a great conversation, and honestly, Cenk should have watched that before he did this interview, because what we had was actually a civil and productive exchange of ideas. We both pushed back on each other, but respectfully so. Weren't bringing, well, you're friends with Jimmy Dore, and you're friends with Cenk Uygur, and I'm mad at you. Like, it's this like fucking playground politics. Personally, I think I conducted myself better than Cenk did when it came to my disagreement with Briahna Joy Gray. But again, let's keep watching, because this does get better.
I don't think that that's helpful. Obviously, you can do what you want. I can't control that. But I am articulating what I experienced. And I experienced a lot of animus. And I experienced this animus when you referred to me as a fake leftist. I have never had any kind of negative interaction with you. I've never feuded with you privately or publicly. I've never said anything negative about you on the internet. So I thought it was pretty hurtful.
You talked with Jordan. You talked with Jordan about how we changed our politics at TYT. Based on what? And changed it to what? Changed it from what?
I don't remember. Truthfully, so a lot of people come on my show and they maintain, like, I confess I'm not a long time TYT viewer. So I would never say something like that, I don't think, because I don't have that perspective. Other people do come on my show and they say their opinions. And other people, I think, like Jordan, has been in this universe for much longer time.
By the way, huge credit to Briahna Joy Gray for remaining so fucking classy throughout this whole interview. It would have been pissing me off. I would have been like, sit your fucking ass down and shut the fuck up. I'm not accountable for what every single one of my hundreds and hundreds of guests have said on my platform. Sorry that one time I had Jordan Sheridan on and he hurt your fucking feelings. Like, get the fuck over it, bro. That's not the same thing as her feuding with you or beefing with you or posting, unfair things about you. And yeah, it is fair to talk about how TYT has changed. It is fair. We've talked about that 100 times. TYT's changed massively, not just as far as their actual political positions, which I do think have softened, but just as far as the entire show. It's a shadow of its former self. TYT fucking sucks these days. Every time you tune in, it's like some random host you've never seen that has no charisma and no good points to make, zooming in from some shitty backdrop. The show is a shadow of its former self, and it is a clear-cut example of why taking a bunch of corporate fucking money waters down your product and your vision, which is something that Cenk and Anna constantly talk about when it comes to political candidates. They, acknowledge the corrupting influence of corporate money in politics, but when it comes to their own goddamn show, they can't practice what they preach. And it has watered down your show, Cenk. It has made your show shitty. And, other channels and other commentators have every right to acknowledge that and discuss it and talk about it. Because, yeah, TYT was and still is one of the most relevant independent leftist media platforms. So, yeah, it's going to be part of the discussion, Cenk. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's not like they don't have conversations about Rachel Maddow and Fox News and any of these other independent or non-independent mainstream media fucking organizations that they want to take shots at. This is the entire idea, right? When you put your ideas out for the public to consume them, you also are putting them out there for people who disagree with you to come back and refute you. And this is exactly like what I was saying earlier in the stream when she, he kind of fed her a shit sandwich, was like accusing her of being fucking a Tulsi simp right off the bat, an agent of fucking Gabbard, apparently. I don't fucking know. And then she is like, yes, Cenk, you were fucking, you were a trailblazer, and like all these fucking things. Is still so nice to him and so cordial. And I think that she plays it off masterfully because it just makes Cenk look like a fucking malding dick. He looks like a fucking, like, just a mean grouch who's taking everything massively personally. And it's just a bad look. And any kind of criticism that he has of Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald and, the right wingification of the fucking, left media space is getting completely shred by just how poorly he comes across as a person. He just looks mean and unfriendly, and any point that he's trying to make is mute after that.
Yeah, and by the way, it is not a smear. The reason TYT makes less money now is because their show fucking sucks now. That's why. They used to make more money because the show was interesting and edgy and unique, and it offered something that corporate media didn't, and they swore on the show, and it had a real personality to it. And then they took a fuck ton of corporate money and it watered the entire product down. So Blazing Butter, if you're not familiar with the 2015 and pre-2015 era of TYT, I understand. why you might not might not get the change that occurred. But if anyone has been watching TYT since like the pre-Bernie Sanders era, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. And again, if they're making less money now, which I don't even know if that's true, but if they're making less money now, it's because less people are watching them because the product is way, way, way fucking worse. And I can tell you that as someone that used to really like TYT. Anyway.
Yeah, and I would also add, if they are making less money, and I imagine that's completely true. Look at the ratings right now for every single major company, right? CNN is eating shit. MSNBC is eating shit. They're losing money out their ass. What did Cenk do? What did he dream for TYT to be? He dreamed for it to be another fucking cable news conglomerate. And so what did he start doing? He channeled all of the content towards that. There was a fuck ton of Trump content coming out in late period fucking TYT. That was the way they pivoted their show. That was how they retained their audience. It was all about Russiagate, and then it was about January 6th, and then it's over, right? Now Trump's like, I mean, now maybe they're running a new wave with the FBI shit. Who fucking knows? But all of the, I don't fucking know. All the media outlets that did that, they took a massive hit financially afterward because they bet on a bad horse, right? Trump wasn't around forever. They burned all their credibility. Now people just don't watch them. There's also just less people consuming progressive media content. So with the amount of people that they're probably paying, and they bubbled and expanded to be a lot of bad business decisions is what I'm saying. It's not like their fucking integrity is fucking making them smaller. Again, it's the exact opposite, as Gavin pointed out.
Time than I have. He might have had the view that there's been a shift, and he's a guest. He's entitled to his opinion. I don't really have anything to say about that one way or the other. But I would like, if we can, keep this conversation focused on us and whatever your concerns were about me, since you're the one who called. I mean, I don't mean this accusatorily. I'm just trying to unpack this. You referred to me as a fake leftist, and I reached out to you about having a conversation about it because I didn't want this to explode, and I'm really unhappy with all of the disputes that have happened on the left. I wanted to clear the air and be able to have a direct conversation with you about whatever your concerns are about me. And I think it might be more productive to talk about our relationship now here, as opposed to all of these other issues that you have with other factors and other people that I can't speak for.
Yeah, so I agree with that, but again, the flow of the conversation is forcing me to say one last thing about the personal animus point. Look, Briahna, I'm trying to give you an earnest answer. So when Jimmy said horrible things about how he sexually harassed Anna, but even if you put that aside, and I don't know why on God's green earth you would put that aside, and he then accused everyone of work getting funded, including us, by Nancy Pelosi and the CIA. When Sam Cedar and Jimmy Dore were both part of the network, Sam and Michael Brooks, who I love, would attack Jimmy all the time. And I told them, don't do that. You're bringing needless personal animus into this. We've got to stick together. We agree with the issues. Don't make it personal. And I wouldn't even, and as much as I loved Michael, and now I honestly, looking back on it, regret it, I wouldn't have him on the show as long as he kept attacking Jimmy, because I didn't want the personal animus. So, and I give you that as an example of me regulating on that, and with the guys that I love, Sam and Michael.
I just want to say it's based that Michael didn't give a fuck and said, "Fuck your show, Cenk. I'm gonna do what I want."
Also, that's when Jimmy was a fucking employee of your network, Cenk. Like, yeah, you were protecting your employee from criticism. That's a little bit different than what they're talking about. And again, what does Jimmy Dore even have to fucking do with anything? Like, there are valid criticisms of Jimmy Dore, but the way he's just trying to tie Briahna to him is ridiculous. Yeah,
it undermines any actual substantive criticism of Jimmy Dore that you might want to level, right? Because because people just point to Cenk Uygur and his fucking malding and his horseshit accusations that all come from personal animus, and then they're like, "See, this is Dore derangement syndrome," and it's like, of course, this is Dore derangement syndrome, but that doesn't mean that every accusation of, like, fucking poor strategy or bad analysis is Dore derangement syndrome. So it gets in his own way again.
Right, who's now, of course, passed away. Okay. So I know for a fact, if Jimmy was saying, hey, Briahna Joy Gray is getting funded by Nancy Pelosi and might be working with the CIA, I'd say, Jimmy, you're massively out of bounds. And I'm not gonna work with you, and I'm not gonna be your ally in any goddamn thing as long as you keep saying these insane, lunatic things. So that is what led me to believe that you were aligned with fake leftists. So I'm answering.
And again, sorry to keep breaking in, but the end point of his logic is that Briahna Joy Gray shouldn't have supported the force the vote strategy because Jimmy Dore had previously been critical of the Young Turks publicly. Like, that's really what you want people to be making their decisions strategically as commentators based on? Like, you really think it's smart to be like, oh, well, because this person did this one thing one time, I'm going to now not support a policy that I obviously would otherwise. Like, that's just dishonest, and that is bringing personal animus into it. And even if I agree that Jimmy Dore can be super toxic and super unproductive, and oftentimes just like fucking disgustingly vile, in my opinion, if he has an idea that I support, I'm still gonna fucking support it if it ends up in a position that we both agree on, right?
Like, let me just give a fucking non-incendiary example of why that makes so much sense, right? I think it's all safe to say we all don't like Joe Biden, right? I think that it's safe to say he's a fucking criminal. He fucking, obviously a bunch of bad guy, bad hombre, as they say. He says overnight that he's had an awakening and he wants a refurbished, rejuvenated working class. Now we're going to fight inflation by giving everybody $35 an hour. If they work in a guaranteed job or whatever the fuck. I hate Joe Biden. I think that he's a bad person, but why the fuck wouldn't I enthusiastically wake up that morning and say, I'm going to do everything in my fucking power to help Joe Biden accomplish this one fucking goal that I agree with? And then he's like, oh yeah, and we're also going to give like $100,000 more to every cop. I'd be like, fuck you, we're not doing that. But I would still work on this other thing with him, right? It's so ridiculous. Jimmy's he doesn't even have any political power. He's just a fucking commentator. Is it so criminal to just be like, yeah, that's a good idea. That one fucker over there, he's talking some sense in this instance. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and in case anyone wants to say that's inconsistent with my previously stated position about working with or giving credit to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I would push back on that by saying that I don't think me and Marjorie Taylor Greene actually do share the same goal. Her version of dismantling the FBI is, removing any sort of accountability for Donald Trump and making sure that he's not investigated. That's all she cares about. My idea of dismantling the FBI, abolishing the FBI, is for completely different reasons, and the end result would be something totally different. The only agreement we have there is totally rhetorical, totally nominal. The difference with the Jimmy Dore force the vote situation is whatever you think about Jimmy Dore, the end goal was the same. My vision of force the vote was the same as his vision, and the conclusion would have been the same as well. So it's a totally different scenario, just in case anyone wants to bring that up.
Gavin, ready for the haters.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Infinite Bomb Dog, for the $5. Breeze expression the whole time he's talking is priceless. Yeah, like I said, this is a masterclass in just staying calm and classy in the face of this bloviating buffoon.
Thank you for the Infinite Bomb Dog.
The question you were asking.
Just to be really clear, because I didn't insert myself into an argument that you.
No, you did. You kept backing him over and over again.
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. I keep backing force the vote. I believe in force the vote, and I'm going to continue to back that kind of adversarial politics until the day I die. Whether Jimmy supports it, whether someone else supports it that you might not like, whether someone I disrespect deeply like Cornel West supports it, and Chris Hedges supports it, and Crystal Ball supports it. All of these people were supporting this idea. And what was frustrating to me was how unable people were to engage with it on its substance, in part because they were so caught up in the ad hominems with Jimmy. So again, I can't speak to any of the stuff that you just talked about. I don't know who's funded by who. That's none of my business. I choose to judge people about the content of their opinions on the policies that I care about. So with respect to force the vote, I was frustrated with some of the backlash against David Sirota. I was also frustrated with David Sirota coming out of the gate a little timid on the issue, but I reached out to David Sirota. I talked to David Sirota on my show and his, and we worked it through, and I addressed all of the concerns he had about force the vote. And he ended up being one of the best advocates for force the vote and engaging, because we engaged and we were able to add to the idea and say, you know what? The part about the Medicare for All is a largely performative vote to get the issue discussed in the context of this pandemic. But what concrete asks could we make? And David Sirota was instrumental in coming up with some of those asks, like getting Richie Neal off of the head of the Ways and Means Committee, like getting the PAYGO exemptions, which although there's a lot of discussion about how the squad did get those, that wasn't in fact the case. And he enriched the idea because he was able to participate in the conversation. And I'm so grateful to him for that. And Ryan Grimm and I, despite having a lot of disagreement over this issue, we're able to have a private conversation where we worked through our differences. He came on my show in bad faith. He was able to acknowledge some missteps that he had made about not pushing back in an interview that he had with Pramila Jayapal when she gave as an excuse for not doing force the vote. And remember, he's the only one who got an actual an interview with a squad member about this. And when he asked her why she didn't support force the vote, she said because Kevin McCarthy could be Speaker of the House. Ryan Grimm knew that wasn't the case. He didn't push back at the time. He said he regrets doing that. We were able to make our apologies and move forward with our relationship. And I value.
by the way, guys, just wanted to quickly say, please hit that subscribe button. We are almost to 27,000 subs, inching closer and closer by the second, as you can see here. Just 6 away. So hit that subscribe button right now in case you haven't. Oh, no, only 5 away. Come on, guys. Let's do this together. Hit that subscribe button. Hit it now.
Yeah, and also this is a perfect place to pause because I wanted to talk about that was a phenomenal fucking answer by Briahna Joy Gray, and it also completely for the last time I think nails Cenk in a coffin, where he had this whole strategy going into the conversation where he was just going to make Briahna look bad, make her look unlikable, make her look like a crazed, deranged Jimmy Dorsum. And that doesn't work at all. It actually massively backfires. And what she's able to do so eloquently is, actually give people examples from sources that they trust in his audience, right? And say, here's what I was able to do constructively with people who regularly come on this platform to speak to the audience from a place of authority, right? Ryan Grimm has been on TYT multiple times. I think even in like a hosting role, not like permanently, but just, filling in, as well as David Sirota, who I don't think he's ever hosted, but he's certainly been on panels at TYT multiple times. These are people that Cenk's audience would trust. These are people that Cenk can't just come out and throw under the bus and say, fuck all these guys, because they're his buddies and they're in his network, so he's not going to do that. And then she talks about how these people, admittedly, at first were skeptical about Force the Vote, but after debate and good faith discussion, and I've never talked to David Sirota, but we've talked to Ryan Grimm a bunch of times, and I can say that even when we disagree, he's always interested in a real thoughtful discussion. And she's able to say, here's how we changed those people's minds. Here's how when something was incorrect, I reached out to them and we shored it up and all these different things. It just makes the Force the Vote people sound infinitely reasonable and Cenk sound like essentially like a partisan, like somebody that's just working for a team. And that team was anti-Force the Vote point blank from jump for no reason.
Yep. Also, thank you guys so much. We just hit 27,000 subscribers. So thank you guys so much. I'll throw that up on screen before we get back to this interview. But yeah, big deal. So thank you guys so much. As we see, we're growing in comrades by the minute. 27,002 subscribers. So thank you guys so much for hitting that subscribe button. We really appreciate you guys tuning in and subscribing, like I said. We'll stop and get back into the interview. But yeah, thank you guys so much for helping us achieve that milestone. Really appreciate it. And let's get right back into the meat.
Ryan deeply, again, as my former boss and someone from whom I've learned an enormous amount on the left. So I hope that a lot of people, including you and I, potentially maybe someday, I don't know, none of my business, you and Jimmy, people like Aaron, I think they all add to the left and are very valuable.
No, they do not add to the left.
I'm sorry, Cenk, but when there's so many big dragons out there to slay, to spend all of this energy and have all of this anger worked up against people who care about Medicare for all, who care about a $15 minimum wage.
No, they don't. Briahna, this is my point to you. This is what I'm trying to get across, okay? So now those forces are spending 98% of their energy backing right-wing talking points, backing Tucker Carlson, backing Donald Trump, backing the Republican Party, never, ever, ever criticizing them, spending all their energy attacking Nina Turner and David Sirota and Ryan Grimm, the best progressives in the country, and the squad, the only people who are not taking corporate PAC money, the only people that are even trying a little bit. And they spend all their energy doing that, and you go, oh, they're great leftists. No, they're not. And they're getting, literally some of them, like Glenn Greenwald, are getting paid by Peter Thiel through Rumble. They're getting paid through their right-wing donors.
I just want to throw it back in Cenk's face that if you're going to challenge Glenn for being on Rumble, I could immediately bring up the fact that Hassan Piker, who you regularly create content with, is a Twitch partner and is exclusively on the fucking platform owned by Jeff Bezos, right? Like if ownership is fucking incriminating, right? Like how many views does TYT get from Facebook? Facebook is owned by Peter Thiel in a large capacity. Like I've always thought that was such a horseshit criticism. Like we all work for Google. Like if you become a Twitch contractor, yeah, you are fucking technically owned by the parent company that owns Amazon. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just such a
TYT itself is on Twitch as well. So yeah, 100%. It's a ridiculous criticism. And again, they took all that money from Katzenberg and Romer. Like, come on, bro. Like you've also taken money from both Democrat and Republican donors. Anyway.
Also, Gavin and I found out Katzenberg was the chairman of Disney. That guy is definitely an oligarch. He founded DreamWorks after being the chairman of Disney.
Patreon supporters. So when you aid and abet and you make it seem like, oh, when Jimmy tells you that the real problem is progressives and not Republicans, that he's on the left, you're helping that deception.
Well, Cenk, for one, you should really talk to Jimmy. I am not a ventriloquist dummy for Jimmy Dore. He, I'm sure, would be open and happy to talk to you.
Also, Cenk, people constantly accuse you of being fake left too. And I personally push back on that. Like, even if I hardcore disagree with Cenk, and I do think it's fair to say he's not a socialist. The other day, he ridiculously branded himself a democratic capitalist, which was hilarious. But still, he's clearly on the left. Like, from the spectrum of right to left, like, he's clearly more on the left. I'm not going to go around here saying you're a fucking fake leftist. In the same way, it's just so fucking dumb to do that to Briahna, who, again, you can disagree with her on a few issues, but to say she's not on the left is just fucking patently absurd and inaccurate.
Yeah, it also debases the left entirely writ large, right? Because you will say, oh, what at the MSNBC, TYT, right? They're the same thing. It's like, no, they're not. MSNBC doesn't want us to have fucking Medicare for all, right? So it's not helpful when people do that to Cenk either, right? As you said, and then it's not healthy when Cenk does that to fucking Jimmy Dore or Briahna Joy Gray, like, oh, you're fake leftists. It's like, no, they're not, and anyway.
And with Jimmy, I mean, it is undeniable, like I said, that he constantly panders to the right wing. I still wouldn't go as far as to call him a right winger or a fake leftist. But with that, you can't even say that about Briahna. I don't even think she really panders to the right wing. I mean, maybe a little bit with some of the Hill titles, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is right or whatever. But still, they're going to discuss that too. No, in no way could you say that she's not on the left.
Just cannot speak for other people, and I really wish you would respect me enough to engage with me as the human being that's sitting in front of you, and not asking me to speak for these random men who I'm not accountable for. I'm not their mom. I'm not in league with them or in allegiance with them. I respect them for the ways that they advance the issues that I want to advance and protect. And when I disagree with them, I disagree with them about the specific issues that I disagree with them on, and I don't make it personal. And I think that's really good advice for everybody in this community.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to ask me specifically,
yes,
I do think that they are, depending on the issue, there's a lot of really good faith engagement happening. So I don't see it, and I respect that you obviously see this differently. I don't see critiquing the few people that we have that are in positions of power to actually advocate for us as attacking them or trying to bring them down. When I say something like the progressives in Congress, because of the narrow margin in the House, could have had any number of force the vote moments over the course of this last 18 months. That they could have. You mentioned the $15 minimum wage. During force the vote, when AOC said to Justin Jackson that she was going to reserve her political capital for a $15 minimum wage, part of why I didn't have quite the same reaction as Jimmy. I was very frustrated, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't quite willing at that point to kind of go all in on the fraud squad characterization. Because I thought, well, maybe she knows something that we don't know. And maybe when the time comes, she really will, and they will, all of them together, I don't mean to put it all on her, but all of them together will vote as a block and hold up must-pass legislation like the American Rescue Plan to make sure, if not a $15 minimum wage, something significant that was on the cutting room floor got into the bill. They all had the power to be the mansions and cinemas of the left, right? And when that moment passed, it didn't happen. When no one really called out the parliamentarian trick in stripping at 15 from the bill at the time, when Pramila Jayapal was reported to have whipped the votes to make sure the Progressive Caucus did not, in fact, hold up the bill to fight for the issues that we sent them to Congress for, I think it's absolutely incumbent on us to call that out and push them to be better. Because if they're not fighting for us while they're in there, if they're not maximizing their ability to use their leverage for the most vulnerable people in this country, I don't know what they're there for.
Okay, we can
so
jump
Briahna,
in really quickly.
Every
there.
time
I just want to bring up the fact that she makes an excellent point when she talks about the abandoned. You guys remember the infrastructure bill? So this wasn't just force the vote, right? This was another critical fucking blunder from the squad that people like Briahna Joy Gray constantly get flack for pointing out was the fact that they went ahead and voted for the decoupled version rather, they didn't refuse to participate in voting for that first part of the fucking bill, if you know what I'm talking about. And now we've gone down from Bernie, who originally said, a $6 trillion infrastructure bill is too small, right? Okay, well then you have, he says, I'm not going any below 3.5 trillion, right? And then we debated with Ryan Grimm whether or not they would get over 2.5 trillion in total. And then the can gets kicked down the road so far that everybody thinks that nothing is going to get passed until they bring up the Inflation Reduction Act, which has absolutely nothing to do with reducing inflation. Now, we went from $6 trillion, and I want you guys to all take a fucking guess at how much money they ended up spending on the Inflation Reduction Act that people who are on the left go around and tout as a massive victory. Okay, $750 billion. So a fucking pittance compared to what was being discussed and floated in serious circles just 6 months ago, right? And we're supposed to take it as the same victory. No, we have every reason to call these people the fraud squad. Bernie Sanders was the only one that was out there calling horseshit in the Senate, until the midnight hour. I guess you can give Warnock and Ossoff credit for one fucking protest vote. Bernie did like 7 amendments. Anyway, just wanted to throw that curveball in there because she mentioned that infrastructure.
Yeah, totally. And thank you so much, once again, Infinite Bomb Dog, for the $5. I watched Bree's Vanguard and TYT's interviews that day. It was night and day, respectful and healthy debate with Gavin, a catapult of BS with Cenk. Well, thank you so much for watching our interview with Briahna. And if you guys haven't checked that out, I definitely would recommend you watch it. I thought we had a really, really interesting and productive exchange. And yeah, I totally agree with you. It is for the most part a catapult of BS with Cenk. I get he's trying to come off as a chest beating alpha male or whatever for his audience. But yeah, and thank you also for the $5 here. I feel so bad for Bree. She tried to have a real convo with Cenk, but he wasn't there for that. He wanted one shots and clips. Yeah, and seemingly he just had a misunderstanding of like what Briahna Joy Gray stands for and talks about on her show, and like generally espouses as a commentator. Like it's almost like he went into this thinking that she was like fucking a literal right winger or something, and he's like slowly realizing that like, oh, Briahna Joy Gray is not fucking Tommy Lauren or Candace Owens. Like, no, she's actually a leftist that has are like intelligent positions.
Yeah, and how disrespectful is that, right? How egomaniacal is that of Cenk to just have this person who was the fucking press secretary for Bernie Sanders in 2020, right? Closer to the movement than a lot of to make Bernie Sanders president than any of us will ever get. Sure, the shit closer than me or Cenk ever got, right? She was in the shit, on the day-to-day grind. To challenge somebody like that for what? Like, and then to completely ignore their credentials, to show no interest in any of their own positions, just to project whatever your minuscule understanding or super shallow grasp of these other commentators, and project them all onto this person that's trying their best to be polite to you, even though you're a fucking piece of shit and it's so obvious that you don't deserve her politeness, right? As Gavin mentioned, we would have fucking easily exploded at the condescension and the rudeness way before she did, and she never even does. She just fucking maintains herself the entire time while Cenk malds. But he did. He wanted one shots and clips and fireworks, and I think that Brie played it smart. She just comes in and makes him the villain because that's what he decided he wanted to do, while she's just being the reasonable person that's articulating solid leftist points. And I hope that his audience benefits from this, listening to somebody say, hey, no, force the vote wasn't this crazy caricature of what you guys were saying. It was actually a very reasonable strategy, and we could do that all together again in the future when the opportunity comes, if we don't let our fucking stupid bullshit get in the way again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so well said. And thank you also, Victor, for the $4.99. If right-wingers watch JD instead of Crowder or Shapiro or Rave Dubin, isn't that a win? Not defending the pandering, but I used to be right-wing before Rising. Were you exposed to Jimmy Dore via Rising? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying that pandering on... Yeah.
I think he's saying is that he was exposed to Democrat or like left ideas on Rising, and he's wondering if people who typically watch Shapiro or Rave Dubin, see Jimmy, if they'll be like brought to the left of that.
Sure, I mean maybe in rare edge cases, yes, that is definitely possible, and if that works, then that's great. But I mean, in the same way, I could say, oh well, if I constantly pander to like fucking normie Democrat Biden voters by talking about how base Joe Biden is, well, maybe one or two of them will become a radical leftist. Like no one would defend that. No one would say that's a good idea. Let's start let's make all of our fucking headlines and all of our content about how base Joe Biden is, in the hope that, maybe a few of those shit libs will turn into, radical leftists. Like I just generally don't think that logic is like it holds up, but I definitely understand what you're saying, Victor. And thank you so much for the $4.99. Also think you left his best for the $10. What?
Well, I was just going to also respond to that super chat. Because I was gonna say I kind of think that what actually happens is that the leftist actually just becomes like a dancing monkey for the right wing, as if it's like, oh, look at this person, and then they just over time become Dave Rubin, right? Like we have to remember, Dave Rubin started out on the TYT network just like Jimmy Dore, right? And over time, you learn where your bread is buttered, as people say, right? Who's paying your bills? Well, then you stop really ever bringing up those left-wing ideas, and it's more just, the 24/7 Democrats are bad, progressives are bad. And if Cenk had, been more sensible and more fucking, rational, I think he could have made a more compelling argument about how it's not a good idea to only praise Republicans and bash progressives all day. I'm sympathetic to some of those arguments. I've made them on this show, so has Gavin. But he doesn't make any of those arguments. So yeah, it definitely, anyway, so that was all I wanted to say about that, Victor.
Yeah, absolutely. And think you also left is best for the $10. Door defends socialist and communist countries against U.S. imperialism all the time, debunking U.S. media lies. I don't remember the last time TYT did that. They probably still think Juan Guaido is president of Venezuela. I don't think they're that fucking shit libby. Like, I don't think they're that level. But as far as Jimmy Dore, I mean, yeah, some of his content on foreign policy I agree with, but also he'll literally platform people like Jackson Hinkle constantly and let them run their mouth and literally espouse actual propaganda. So that's also a knock against Jimmy, but I definitely understand what you're saying. Left is best. And thank you for the $10.
Yeah, I don't know if they really do I don't actually know where Cenk sits on Venezuela, because I wouldn't be surprised if he got we're gonna learn more about how he feels about the gray zone. I know they were fucking really early in covering Venezuela. I don't know if he'll pull a Jimmy Dore. I don't know exactly what their views on Venezuela are, but I wouldn't be shocked if they were still like, oh, both sides are fucking terrible. I don't fucking know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the super chat. And thank you, Christina, for the $4.99. Cenk is the same kind of narcissist as Trump. Yeah, and speaking of, I would say that Jimmy too. I think that Jimmy and Cenk are, two sides of the same coin. They're both these like wannabe alpha male chess beaters that, can't handle disagreements and, shit all over everyone that disagrees with them and tries to cancel their political opponents. And yeah, I think they're totally the same, two sides of the same coin, which is part of the reason why, Jimmy had to be basically kicked off the main panel on TYT is because Cenk didn't want him stealing the show.
Yeah, and I think that another thing that people are realizing and why you're seeing more and more Trumpian behavior, that shit fucking sells. What's Cenk trying to do? He's trying to get eyeballs on his TV. What the fuck? What's Jimmy trying to do? He's trying to get eyeballs on the computer screen. And Trump was a magnet for eyeballs, man. We were just talking to Jesse Ventura this fucking weekend, right? That Donald Trump in many ways modeled himself off of Jesse. Why? Because Jesse could attract eyeballs. That's why you're seeing a lot of a through line. And of course, everybody in media is a fucking narcissist anyway. Like why else would you fucking get in front of a camera and espouse your views all day? Like, okay, well, we all think we're special. So, anyway, but thank you so much for the, $4.99, Christina.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christina. And thank you, Sir Switch, for the $2. Jimmy must have fucked Cenk's wife, let it go. Yeah, I mean, it does seem like he has just a ridiculous personal beef here. And, maybe that's valid. Maybe Cenk has good reasons to be pissed off at Jimmy Dore. I don't know what the fuck has happened behind the scenes. But to bring that into what should just be a substantive discussion about strategy and policy is very childish.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, he just makes it all personal while he's talking about how he hates that it's all personal and I don't want to get into any of these like fucking personal animosity, but here we go. I'm forced to, blah, blah, blah. I don't know.
Absolutely. And thank you, Michael, for the $10. Gavin, you did a better job talking to Briahna Joy Gray because you actually made her mad. She used profanity on your show, which she almost never does. Cenk did a bad job because she is totally calm and owns him. Well, it is true that, she gets more heated in our discussion than she does in this discussion. She does remain very calm throughout this entire interview, but she did get a little bit more heated. There's no doubt about it. And I guess she did use some profanity. I forgot about that. But yeah, she used some profanity. So it is funny that because I clearly was acting in much more good faith, but I just think that means she was actually we were actually having a serious and passionate exchange of ideas. That's what I say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I thought you guys did a fucking great job. I was mostly watching a fucking tennis match. I was definitely center in that conversation, but I thought that Gavin, you did about as well articulating your fucking points as you could have. So I was also very impressed.
Well, thanks, Zach. And thank you, Beth or Lugar, for the $1.99. What's wrong with Jay Hinkle? Okay, you guys know that I don't use terms like fucking Russian propagandist lightly, because a lot of people are falsely accused of that, and it's just ridiculous. It is a McCarthyite smear tactic. But if your entire commentary on a situation like what's happening in Ukraine, it consists of just reading point by point the state line every single time, literally reading the same talking points that are espoused on RT when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine. If that's your job as a commentator, then I do think it's fair to call you a propagandist, in the same way that if my commentary on foreign policy just consisted reading the American state line on whatever imperialism we're doing or whatever conflicts we're engaged in, that would make me a propagandist. Sorry, but the same exists for other governments and media figures as well. And that's the problem with Jackson Hinkle, is that he uncritically regurgitates Kremlin propaganda on what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, again, without investigating or pushing back on any of the framing from the aggressor's point of view.
Yeah, and on top of that, look, my big thing with Jackson Hinkle that I've known from jump, really since Gavin and I were like the first people that called out his channel for being like just fodder for clicks, essentially, right? Like when he was doing that like hot or not type shit with his buddy, like fucking Dilt Biffrin or whatever the fuck it was called. Anyway, we were like, this is the kind of guy that's just gonna stick his finger in the wind and go wherever popularity takes him. And I think that is the crux of what it is. He's found out that there's a fucking ravenous audience on YouTube for people who just want to see like Putin equal based libs equal shit, and he's gonna get all jacked and he's gonna like fucking use homophobic rhetoric to make himself look like an alpha male to these people, and apparently it's making him massively successful, outside of the fact that he keeps getting banned for spreading foreign governments propaganda. So don't support the censorship, but can't help but stand back and laugh. I'm not gonna fucking shed any tears or strain my voice fucking for that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Infinite Bomb Dog, once again for the $5. Cenk not only makes it personal, but refuses to debate those who he actually has a problem with, Dor, Glenn, Mate. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later in the conversation. But thank you so much for the super chat.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was literally what I already said in the beginning, is that he wants to just project all of this onto Dor, onto Briahna, because he won't talk to Dor, Glenn, or Mate under this guise that they're bad faith actors. When we already talked about it, he's had fucking David Duke on this podcast, like as the most fucking vile bad faith actor possible.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much for the super chats, Infinite Bomb Dog, and thank you, Renzo. Who is Dor converting to the left? He smears anyone. Happy to see an ex-president being held accountable. Most of his videos are right-wing clickbait. Yeah, that's what we're saying. He constantly panders to the right wing. I think that the investigation of former President Donald Trump is proof of that, and the way he's framed that, the way he's talked about it, and basically, more and more issues now, to the point where it's like every other issue he just buys into the right wing framing. But again, this isn't really about Jimmy Dore. I don't want to get mired in the muck of talking about our personal disagreements with Jimmy Dore and Jackson Hinkle. This conversation is about Briahna Joy Gray and her points of view. And again, she's not Jimmy Dore. She barely ever even interacts with the guy. Seemingly, she agreed with Force the Vote, but it's not really the point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the point, although Cenk tries desperately throughout this entire conversation to make it all about Jimmy Dore. Anyway.
Try to get to talk to about you and about policy. You say something that's maddening that forces me to clarify, and then we get back into the same muck. Okay, so in this case, two things. You framed it as, I don't know, holding people accountable is not attacking them. Okay, so let's be very clear on what we've done and what the definitions are. We have held those same individuals accountable massively. Okay, I did a video saying I'm burning all my bridges with all the Just Democrats, a group I formed and named, to try to get them to take action on things we could actually win on, like $15 minimum wage. I burned my bridge with Bernie Sanders, forcing him to, and we did a petition, our viewers sent in videos, and it worked, and it forced Bernie's hand to have a vote on $15 minimum wage. And then we found out who the 8 Democrats were that voted against the $15 minimum wage, and we found out that those were 2 of the top allies for Joe Biden, the 2 senators from Delaware. So that was actually a force of vote that was incredibly effective in at least finding out who the bad guys are. We got no help from anyone else because they were busy with, their, as you would say, personal animus, but our audience was enough and we did it anyway. So when you say it as if I'm opposed to it, are you like, I am philosophically massively in favor of it?
With all due respect, and people can play back the tape, nothing I said was meant as an antagonist. I think that you're personalizing this and inserting yourself into this. All I was talking about was what my feeling, I was using an example to demonstrate why I don't think that criticizing the squad is attacking the squad. And so what you're saying is you also criticize the squad. I think that's great. So we understand each other. We understand, because we've both done it, that having a critique of leftists in Congress, even if they're the best that we've got, that critique is necessary to try to maximize and push them in the direction that we think as voters and as media figures they should go. So I don't we're actually in agreement here, and I'm not really sure what the dispute is.
Yeah, no, because you said
She's trying so hard to fucking steer this conversation back into the fucking direct, line. Cenk, while you were gone, Gavin, he makes this whole point where he's like, he's like, I burned all my bridges with the squad. I did X, Y, and Z. And it was like, yeah, you did that months and months and months and months after you got in everybody else's ass for challenging them in that exact same way. You and Anna grandstanded on that TYT clip that Gavin and I reacted to, and they were like, if this is what the squad's doing, then they're not here to represent us. And all this, months and months and months and months after you just spent all this time trying to drop the hammer down on everybody else. And instead of showing your obvious hypocrisy right here, and instead of coming over the top, which she absolutely deserved, and using this as a massive opportunity for Briahna to dunk all over him, for her to say, you fucking idiot, no wonder people are pissed at you. You just said exactly what we've been pointing out for months, and now you just want credit for it because you're an egomaniacal narcissist and you can't accept anybody else had an idea or a conclusion before you. And so but she sets all that aside, and she says, Cenk, I agree with you right here. All you're saying is exactly what I've been trying to point out. All I'm saying is that I want us to, move forward here. And since we're on the same team now, great. I'm on the same team with you when we agree with this. I'm on the same team with them when we agree with this. Let's move forward. And I have to find some reason why we disagree about this again. So I'm going to start talking. It's just fucking maddening.
all right, forget what you said. You framed it as holding them accountable is attacking them. What I was trying to get to, and this sucks.
No.
Hold on.
I was saying the opposite though, Cenk. I'm saying holding them accountable is not attacking them, and you agree with me. So
yes,
what's the problem?
No, so the problem is because this is forcing me to delineate the difference. When Jimmy says in a speech, let's go to, hold on.
Jimmy,
no, I have to give you the distinction. I have to give you the
Did you
distinction between attack and hold
Jimmy?
accountable. No, Briahna, hold on. You have to understand it. When he says, let's go to AOC's house and make her afraid of us physically, that's attacking. Saying, hey, we need you to have this vote on $15 minimum wage because we actually think it can pass, and here's our strategy for it, is holding accountable. When Pramila Jayapal says, hey, let's decouple infrastructure build and build back better, we say, hey, no, that doesn't make any sense. You're going to lose build back better. That's holding accountable. So there were things that were out of bounds that were attacking. So I just want to be clear with the audience and with you. Holding accountable is, we agree, is definitely not attacking. There needs to be lines that you don't cross.
So if you want to be very specific, I personally do believe that protesting in front of politicians' houses is legitimate. I think it's legitimate.
I think it's legitimate. You, but you don't say, let's go make her afraid of us by going to her house. Finish.
When I had Chris Hedges on my show probably last fall, it was one of my favorite episodes ever. And he talked about the politics of fear. And he talked about how if you have a social movement and you want it to be effective, you have to have people afraid of the consequences of not listening to you. And I think that what we've seen over the course of the Biden administration, and even before, when we had the largest protest movement in American history, that was just plainly ignored and disregarded by the party that was supposed to be championing the interests of the people who were in the streets. That they weren't really afraid because ultimately there were no consequences there. And I don't mean threats of physical violence. What I mean by afraid is that there was going to be some tangible consequence to not listening to you. My argument in the summer of 2020 was there needed to be a credible campaign to withhold one's vote. Just some very clear popular policies were committed to by Joe Biden. I think we might live in a different world where, if that had been the case. I'd say the same thing is true now over whatever election happens in 2024 and what these midterm elections coming up. And I also think it means being willing to say Nancy Pelosi, who is the most powerful woman in Congress, person in Congress, probably the most powerful Democrat in the country. She doesn't get to be Speaker of the House if she doesn't turn over some things to the progressives. They had power to do that. And before she was in office, before she was elected, AOC said there's no reason why Nancy Pelosi should be Speaker of the House. I wouldn't vote for Nancy to be Speaker of the House. And so something very concrete that could have happened. You say it doesn't matter if Hakeem Jeffries is Speaker. It matters to Nancy Pelosi. It matters to Nancy Pelosi. And demonstrating a willingness to actually put your money where your mouth is and deeply inconvenience the establishment of the Democratic Party is a much less performative action, I would argue, than asking Bernie Sanders to have an amendment to put a $15 minimum wage back in the bill. When we all know that taking it out of the bill was the real moment of tension point, right? Because putting it back in the bill takes 60 votes. Pulling it out only takes, voted on it in the bill takes 50 votes, which is why the parliamentarian is so crucial. David Stewart has been talking about this because the exact same thing, as I'm sure you know, just happened with this latest inflation bill, where Bernie Sanders, again, the amendment king, is trying to get all of these things back in the bill, but Chuck Schumer stripping them out because the parliamentarian said so, instead of just forcing a vote with them in, despite what the parliamentarian says, turns a 50 vote issue into a 60 vote issue and provides cover for all these Democrats to be able to say, yeah, sure, I want it back in the bill, without ever having any risk to their donor base that it's gonna happen. So why am I saying all this? I'm just wanted to really make it clear. I think we are broadly in agreement. People have different tactics. I understand that Jimmy's tone is not necessarily what I choose. It's not what you choose, and it's not what you like. But I also respect that he channels a lot of the deep anger and resentment that so many people who are failing and being crushed by poverty, by medical debt, by cancer, by all kinds of ailments. Those people are looking at people like you and I, who are sitting here calmly at our desks, talking about these things, in a way that can feel academic to people who are really suffering, and they see something in Jimmy. And if Jimmy is attracting a certain kind of audience and pulling certain people to the left, who resonates with them, I think that's a good thing. And if people don't like that, I think they cannot go other places.
He pulled his entire audience to the right. He pulled his, anyway, I can't.
This would be so maddening to me. So maddening to me. Look at that amazing fucking articulate element or contribution to the discussion that fucking Briahna Joy Gray made. She said, let's look at all of these different things. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about our broad agreement, even though she just dogs him so bad by talking about how his like dumb performative, oh, let's get this amendment back in the bill thing was like, no, you had already missed the boat by then. It was, but she's like, see, we're broadly fucking strategically, in the same framework here. Let's call that a W. And then he just immediately does what he's always done the entire conversation. No. Jimmy Dore is the right winger. All these people are right wingers, and that's deeply problematic. It's like that was completely irrelevant to what she was talking about in this instance, and you're completely unwilling to engage with it at all. At this point, I would fucking be compelled to just hang up. I'm like, what the fuck? 4 times in a row, I've come at you with some shit that we are actually trying to talk about politics right here. And 4 times in a row, you've come back with, this is why I don't like Jimmy Dore and I think he's a right winger. Like, dude, fucking shut up. I don't want to hear about that anymore. I don't want to fucking talk about that right now. Can we please talk about fucking anything besides Jimmy Dore is a right winger? Like, what the hell? You are just even if you are 100% right, which you are not, you might be like 18% right. That would be the most I could give you. You are hurting your entire argument so bad by making yourself look so petty and so petulant and childish and fucking rude, that you're just driving anybody who's on the fence here running full speed to Jimmy's audience.
And I can't bear to talk about these guys anymore. Glenn Greenwald kissing Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones' ass is not pulling anyone to the left.
You should talk to him.
Yeah, that
I think it'll be a really fruitful conversation. You're both welcome on Bad Faith.
Okay.
I had, my friend Nathan Robinson had similar concerns about Glenn, which I respected, and so I had them both on to talk about it on Bad Faith. And it was one of our best conversations.
Talking points. Okay, so let's go to our agreements. Okay, so let's be clear. So let's try to go through as many agreements as we can.
Already listed a bunch of your.
So, for example, you said, hey, the key moment is when Schumer takes it out of the bill. Totally agree. That's why we tried to put the $15 minimum wage pressure on before. And as I told all of our allies in Congress, they're lying. Democratic leadership is a bunch of liars. And when they tell you they're gonna do $15 minimum wage, I guarantee you it's a lie. And they didn't believe me. And so I tried to get them to take action before Schumer took it out of the bill, but we didn't succeed, and they didn't believe it. So let's first, obvious question. It looks like you and I agree completely. Democratic leadership totally full of crap, 100% conservative, totally in service of their donors, and you should never trust them. And progressives should have their heads examined if they do. Do we agree with that?
That the progressives shouldn't trust the establishment Dems?
Yes.
Of course.
Okay, of course, great, perfect. Okay, and that's a huge, important thing. We both agree to that. That's great. Okay, so holding the progressives accountable, totally agree. I think Jayapal has been an absolute disaster. I think they're crazy if they're going to have her as the head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus again. The minute she decoupled, we lost Build Back Better and everything that was in it. And so obviously we agree to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I appreciate it at the time. AOC was one of the few people ringing the alarm bell saying the decoupling is the end of it, and she was right. You know, I wish there had been more progressives, and I wish more progressives would continue to call out Pramila Jayapal. I mean, I think the squad, to the extent that they care at all about some of the mistrust that exists now in certain parts of the left, part of it is because there is this perception that we all know how terrible Pramila Jayapal is at this point. You know, the endorsement of Chantel Brown over Nina Turner was a real tipping point for a lot of people. And yet almost nothing was said about it. Everyone just kind of ate it and accepted it. And that doesn't give people a lot of faith in the progressive caucus as a group, or even the smaller group of the squad.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why they do it. It drives me crazy. I think they're wrong. I've said it on air. I've said it off air. As soon as they get to Washington, they believe the biggest myth there ever is. The most important thing is decorum and your colleagues and being nice to them. No, your colleagues are your opponents. They do not want Medicare for all. They don't want Green New Deal. They've said it. Nancy Pelosi said it in every mocking way. She is not your friend. She is not your ally. The minute you treat her as an ally, you're a sucker and you're gonna get played. And that's what happened with Jayapal. And by the way, TYT put pressure on the squad. And look at that, the 6 Justice Democrats were the only ones who voted in the right way to say it should not be decoupled. And credit where credit is due on that, as you just said. So
he goes in and he says we know when representatives go to Congress that they have this exact brain rot, which I totally agree with. But then he goes back to be like, oh, well, in this instance, like they did the right thing. What? We just spent the entire, how far are we into this video? 31 minutes of when they did that exact wrong thing? I don't know. It just seemed like a weird way of putting that back to back. It's like all of these people are going here and they're getting this brain rot. And then, oh yeah, but wait, in this instance, they did the right thing. It's like, yeah, but in all of those other ones that we just talked about, they didn't. So this doesn't validate your point. And I also think that it's hilarious. And I wanted to let the video play so I didn't jump in earlier, how he is just so maniacal and like he has to fucking be the one that says any point that they agree on. If she says it like 30 times that they agree on something, it's like, no, we don't agree on this. And let me just ask you a random question out of left field to see if we're capable of agreeing on anything. And she's just looking at him like, what the fuck is the matter with you? But anyway.
Yeah, that's so true, Zach. And thank you, Sir Switch Crookington, for the $5. Why are we still calling the squad leftist? How does that benefit the leftist movement to be represented by liberals that nobody likes? Well, I definitely understand where you're coming from and sympathize with it, Sir Switch Crookington. And I do think it's fair to call them liberals. But that being said, liberals are still, you know, they're more on the left than the right. And yeah, they're not as pure as, you know, myself and Zach and yourself, Sir Switch, as far as their leftist values. But just from like an organizational perspective, when it comes to the utility of language, you know, if you support abortion rights and you believe in climate change and, you know, you tick off enough of the boxes, yeah, you're more on the left than the right. So it's just easier to refer to someone in shorthand as a leftist or a, you know, someone that's on the right wing or someone that's on the left wing. So yeah, I agree. They're not perfect, pure leftists. But again, just from like a utility of language and organizational perspective, I think it's kind of foolish to say that we should, you know, say they're on the right wing or something like that. Like, yeah, I agree. They're more liberals, but still liberals are technically on the left side of the political spectrum. Maybe on the center if you want to be more kind, but you know, I still think I can understand why people just call them on the left.
Oh yeah, it would. I think it would actually be more counterproductive not to. While I think that it's important to distinguish my leftism from the squad and in the ways that we differ, if you hit the fucking head on where it's like, oh, your candidacy and your platform is based on things like Medicare for all, like, you know, free, free college, things like that. You know, bringing the jobs home, you know, not spending all of our money on wars and, you know, defunding the military and the police and all those different ideas. What we're not really disagreeing on the ideas when it comes to the squad. We're disagreeing on the strategy and the efficacy and the ability to execute on these ideas, right? As opposed to just prop themselves up with those ideas and create a career in the limelight for themselves, but leave all of the people who are actually desperately waiting on the implementation of those values, not just the rhetorical, like, you know, espousing of them from like a high place in government, right? So that I totally understand and yeah, sympathize and empathize with the fucking, you know, inconvenience and the fucking horse shit and the, you know, need to, or the, you know, anger, just frankly, right? But as Gavin pointed out, there are so many people who just do not have the time or the energy or the interest to pay attention in politics all day. And so if we broadly start saying like people like AOC aren't leftists, like, you know, Somebody like my father, who doesn't really, know what's going on in left spaces at all, would be like, well, who the fuck is a leftist? Then are there nobody is a leftist? That sounds like they're gonna lose. Like, fuck that. And that's the one thing that I think the left really needs to get away from, is sounding like losers. Those are candidates that at least actually won. So even though they've disappointed us, I just think that, there's a way of talking about their disappointments and their failures without being like, they're not one of us, like sort of they are. But anyway, thank you so much.
Well, that's why it's important to try to hold them accountable. But also, I just think it gets to the whole, debate itself that Briahna's having with Cenk about finger points. Oh, you're a fake. I'm the only pure leftist. Everyone else is a fake leftist. It's like, okay, if you're, hold enough leftist position, more than 50%, then yeah, okay, you're on the left. Fine. I'm not going to fucking have a semantic battle every time, someone disagrees with me. That being said, I still understand what you're saying, Sir Switch, and I do agree.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like he followed up and says that he, anything that's capitalist reform he views as a liberal position. And I would say in American politics, I think that that's a little bit like rigid,
Yeah. And thank you, Samuel, for the 20, whatever that is.
20 pesos.
20 pesos. Is that what that is?
Yeah, Mexico money.
Oh, gotcha. I was like, what? But thank you so much, Samuel. Really appreciate that. Pointing out Dems are right wing doesn't make you one. Yeah, and I mean, for a lot of the actual elected Democrats, people like Nancy Pelosi, I would not say that they count as even being on the left at all. Like, or even like Joe Biden. Like he is a neoliberal centrist. That's what he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think it's important to be able to distinguish the difference between Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, and God forbid in 6 months, maybe Liz Cheney, and then the squad or Bernie Sanders. You know what I mean? Like, of course, they don't meet my exact definition of leftism, but I still think that we should include Bernie Sanders in like our umbrella of what we're trying to do, given his popularity and his reputation and all those things.
Okay, good. We're in agreement on that. So if we agree that we need to hold all these folks accountable, and corporate Democrats are a huge problem and they're part of the issue, then there isn't much we disagree with on the left. And that's why I get to the right wing and how some folks treat the right wing with kid glove. But I don't want to make any assumptions. And like you say, you don't watch every minute of TYT, of course not, right? And I don't watch every minute of your shows, of course not, right? So that's part of why I had you on here in the first place. I wish we'd have done it in the beginning, but that's on me. So help me understand how you think of the right wing, because when I get to the right wing, I think they're even worse. They're all corrupt, just like the corporate Democrats are. They take the same donor money, right? And then on top of that, they add in personal corruption and on social issues, they're monsters. So do we agree on all that?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, so look, right there, that's the most important thing that we've gotten out of this conversation. Because if I had Glenn or any of the other guys on here, they'd tell me some BS excuse about why they never criticized Trump. Trump monster. Fair?
Of course.
Of course. Okay, great. Wonderful. Already that's 1,000 times better. Okay.
Although, Cenk, I will say this. Some people believe that identifying what appeals to some Americans about these figures, identifying it and speaking to those concerns, and acknowledging that at times figures, even as ones I find as repugnant as Trump, are able to have a diagnosis of what's wrong in America. That is right, despite his prescription for that problem being wrong. Some people see that acknowledgement as somehow an endorsement of those candidates in their policy prescriptions to address the issue. Yeah. So I do think, and again, the lines can become blurry sometimes. I do think sometimes folks say things like, it's legitimate to be concerned about free speech, let's say, or even try to appeal to an audience that is being galvanized by that particular issue and being pulled right because there isn't in the Democratic Party as much emphasis on that particular issue. Or let's say the Russia-Ukraine crisis, where there is a frustration by a lot of leftists that the US's role and the West's role in expanding NATO was a precipitating factor, although it obviously doesn't excuse the independent actions of what Russia does in the context of this invasion, that we need to be having a conversation about it. And it's frustrating that there is at times more of an anti-war sentiment, though it is often in bad faith, that comes out of the left part of the party when the squad members will continue to vote, on the right wing, when squad members are continuing to vote for more aid, et cetera. And I do think that sometimes people bring up, well, this right winger is better than a left winger on this issue, not because they like the right winger or even believe the right winger is acting in good faith, but in order to try to shame the left into saying, why are you letting them occupy this space? Why are you letting them look like they're the vanguards of this issue? It should be us, it should be us. And I think it can be frustrating at times when that effort to make the left be to the left of even the most bad-faced, superficial right-wing actor is characterized as actually believing whatever the right-wing, hypocrite is saying in that moment.
Yeah, so then let me clarify my point of view on that. So when a right-winger agrees with us, I don't look a gift horse in the mouth. So I'm not one of those folks who say, if Donald Trump says it, it must be false. I didn't lend my brain out to anyone or being against anyone across the board, and that makes no sense at all. So if Matt Gaetz is against war and he says, and Mike Lee, they say, hey, you know what? We need the president needs to ask for congressional authorization for war. I love it. They're coming to us. We're not going to them. I will take yes for an answer. So anyone who says no, I'm on Team Democrat, so I hate those guys, so I'm going to cut off my nose to spite my face, I don't agree with, and I find it absurd. Now, that is some issues, and sometimes we'll agree on marijuana legalization with some portion of the right, etc. I'm going to take yes for an answer on all those. But there are other issues. There's actually 3 buckets. There's the bucket in the middle where we don't agree. I don't agree with some people saying they're on the left, right? So Ukraine, for example, questioning the amount of funding that's going to Ukraine totally makes sense. I believe Ukraine is in the right, but hey, whenever we ask for anything at home, we never get it. But as soon as defense contractors are going to make money off of it, we're spending billions, and that isn't necessarily even going to Ukraine. So I find that legitimate. But then when you get the gray zones, and I hate to say it, the Jimmys saying, oh, the Ukrainians are terrorists for fighting back against the Russians. How dare they kill the Russian soldiers? They literally said it. Jimmy did a video about how the Ukrainian civilians were terrorists for firebombing the tanks that were coming to blow up their house.
And by the way, it is true that Jimmy's commentary on Russia is super one-sided. It's fucking ridiculous. It is just propaganda for the most part. So yeah, that is fair to point out.
Again, I think I maybe don't watch as much Jimmy Dore as you might, but I do listen to Aaron Mate and Katie Halper's show. I do hear him in that context. I do see clips from Gray Zone people and things like that. I had Max Blumenthal on the show, and my understanding is that there are these specific instances in which there's not reporting on the West about various skirmishes, about the presence, even if you think it's too minor to talk about, but the presence of Nazi and right-wing groups in the context
that's what I'm talking about, Briahna. You're validating insane right-wing talking points. So
wait a minute, Jay.
There's Nazis in America. There's Nazis in Idaho. Should we attack Idaho? So no, that's a Vladimir Putin talking point as a justification for attacking them.
But for Cenk, I mean, there's a credibility.
I will say, in my humble, lowly opinion, that's probably the most worthwhile thing that Cenk says in this entire conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, if I had Max Blumenthal on the Vanguard and we were talking about the Russia-Ukraine situation, I would push back on his framing more than Briahna did. But I don't think she really considers herself to be a foreign policy expert. So I think she was just kind of what's the word? Like just kind of letting him talk about it. So, I do agree that he probably should have pushed back on him a little bit more. But that's like one interview out of 1,000. I mean, I'm sure everyone could find one interview that someone did that's like a little bit softball. That doesn't mean you're a fake fucking leftist. But yeah, I mean, this is a legitimate area of debate, I think.
Yeah, coming from the grim jobber in chief over here, I don't want to hear anything about fucking softball interviews. I'm kidding, of course. But yeah, look, all I'll say is that, I agree a lot with what, look, using the Nazi example as like fucking quote unquote justification for going in and like liberating or whatever the fuck, whenever you hear those words, big red flags in the reporting from my end. But everybody's free to do their own analysis, and I would never call for the censorship of those crazy fuckers.
Yeah, I mean, using anything as a justification to invade a sovereign nation and kill hundreds of civilians. I mean, there is no justification. Call it what it is. It's a war crime. Anyway, thank you, Michael, for the $5. I agree with Sir Switch. If there are 10 left issues and they vote 5 of them, that's not perfect. But if they vote for 0 of them, they're not on the left. Well, I think this depends on what 10 issues. Like, I'm sure you could find 10 issues that I do consider to be left issues that they have voted for. Like, again, like abortion rights or fucking climate change shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? Anyway.
They also, I mean, like it or not, Michael, like the squad voted for that $15 minimum wage bill. Like, they fucking voted for it. Like, they were in the fucking shit. They passed that. They did vote for it. Like, a lot of times the problem isn't that they're not voting for it. Like, the problem is that they only vote for it when there's nothing that's going to happen. So again, it comes back to a matter of strategy and efficacy more than I think just like, oh, if I could snap my fingers and make this policy happen, they would probably go with more than 5 of those, like, policies.
Yeah, thank you though so much for the super chat. Thank you for the contribution, Michael. We appreciate hearing your perspective as well. And thank you, Beffer Lugar, for the $4.99. Was late and just wanted to make sure it's mentioned Cenk wouldn't go on Briahna's Bad Faith pod. Speaks to an attempt to manipulate and manage the fallout. Yeah, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that part in the interview soon, Beffer. So again, I don't want to spill the beans or anything. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Beffer.
Issue here, because if you mischaracterize other people's arguments, I think there's a legitimate reason to have a
credibility issue. I've never seen Gray Zone not agree with Vladimir Putin. They are total and utter puppets for him. They're disgusting. They're totally liars. If you believe Gray Zone on any of those issues, you're out of your mind. Okay, so
with all due respect, that's not constructive. And if you could,
it's not constructive to agree with Vladimir Putin and right-wing hatchet men. That's what's not constructive, Briahna. That's why I get frustrated.
Cenk, you just finished saying that just because somebody is a bad person, if they're right about something, I'm not going to disagree with it on principle. That's what you just finished saying about taking yes for an answer with some of these conservative right-wing extremists in the United States. I also think it can be true that Putin is a bad faith actor, that he invaded another country, that he's violated international law, all of those things. And also some of the reporting from organizations that apparently you don't have a lot of respect for, but which I do. People like Aaron Mate have been very clarifying in a lot of the international, politics and the history that precipitated these moments that have helped me to have a much clearer understanding of what's going on in the region. Now, do I agree with every single thing that some people in that kind of political cohort says? No. I also talk to people like my brother, who's an international relations expert, and he has a very different view of things. I consume all of this. I respect all of these people. I listen to them and I try to come to my own opinion. But what I don't do is try to do ad hominem attacks against people or impute bad faith
Briahna,
to
you're
people.
not getting it. Now you see that's deceptive, okay? So we did long stories about how Aaron Mate and Gray Zone lied about the chemical attacks in Syria. So when you lie and you do it on purpose and you do it on behalf of an imperial government. Yes, it's not our own, but it's someone else with imperial ambitions who invades other countries and brutally kills their citizens. And you say, well, hey, at least it's not Americans doing imperialism and murdering these people. And I'm gonna pretend that the victims are actually the people who did it. You are aiding and abetting Russian propaganda. I'm not gonna stand for it.
I think you should talk to Aaron about this. I know you won't, but I think you should. But I'm not gonna sit here. Aaron wrote a
It's because he got fucking bodied. Credit where credit is due. He got fucking bodied by Aaron Mate the last. Let's talk about the real reason Cenk won't have Aaron or any of these fuckers back on. When they debated Russiagate, wasn't close, bro.
Yeah, to be honest, I actually thought that Aaron was a little weak in that interview, even though I agreed more with his position than Cenk. That's just my opinion. You go back and rewatch it. I don't think he's as strong as you're remembering.
Bro, he literally called it 100%. There was no, he was 100% right about what happened.
Well, I just mean as far as the debate performance, he kind of got bullied around by Cenk a lot. But no, I mean, obviously, like I said, I agree with the substance. I just mean when it comes to a debate, the person who's correct is not always the winner of the debate.
Okay, well, I would disagree with that. What I was saying was, I think that if you look back at what he was saying on Cenk's show, it aged massively in Aaron's favor.
Agreed. I'm just saying that the winner of a debate is not always the person that's correct about the issues. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think that if you walk away and 3 years down the line, you have, just as big or more of an audience poll, your views were 100% validated, and the guy is still malding the fuck about what happened. I just think that does make Aaron the winner of that debate, but I guess we disagree on that.
That's fair. I just mean in a rhetorical sense, far as the sport of debate. Yeah, I don't think it's fair to say he bodied him in that debate. But anyway, that's a total side point. And yeah, have him back on and fucking hash it out, Cenk. Why not? What are you afraid of? But thank you, Ken, by the way, for the $5. Cenk is the only person on the planet that thinks Brie is a fake progressive. Yeah, I mean, again, if you're actually familiar with her content and the body of work, then yeah, no one would say that. Obviously, she's incredibly progressive.
And I mean, I've never even, yeah, I don't even know where you would really get a whiff of that from, again, unless you're going completely by you're friends with these people I don't like. I mean, had great coverage of even the most fucking divisive issues on Kyle Rittenhouse, all kinds of shit. And she was Bernie Sanders' press secretary, which we've said a shit ton of times, but I do think that's a patch of fucking, valor for the left.
Yeah, absolutely.
an acclaimed award-winning piece about the OPCW report.
It's
if you have a substantive disagreement with his findings, you can have that substantive disagreement with him. But I really think it would be productive if so much of the time you spend here, Cenk, is you calling people names and having these kind of high level ad hominem criticisms of them without engaging in the substance of what they've actually said.
All right, let's talk about how you help the right way.
Disagree with people.
No, because Briahna, what you're doing is every time I say, hey, wait a minute, that helps a right wing talking point. That helps a bad guy like Trump, etc., or Putin in this case. You go, hey, you're being ad hominem. No, wait a minute, you're helping to deceive people when you make it seem like Nazis are a huge part of Ukraine and that the Jewish leader of Ukraine is working with Nazis. That's mental. I'm not going to call that 50-50. I'm not going to say, hey, maybe Aaron's great and maybe the Nazi propaganda he's doing to help Vladimir Putin. Hey, maybe. No, because it makes it look like it's 50-50 when it ain't 50-50. And when I get frustrated with that, you go, well, look, I'm super reasonable. It seems like you're doing personal animus here.
Look, what you just did to me, what you've done to all of them, which is to completely mischaracterize what I just said. When I said the thing about the Azov Battalion, I intentionally, and people can go and rewind and listen to my words because I just said them. I intentionally said it's a small part. It's not da. And
then why mention it? It's a small part of America. You're doing no, but you're mentioning it so to muddy the waters. I can't tell. Maybe the Jewish leader's a Nazi. I can't tell. You're muddying the waters. Why are you mentioning? It's like saying, hey, you know what? I can't believe America's supporting Ukraine. America has a small faction of Nazis in Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. Maybe America's Nazis. I don't know.
If you're interested in actually having a conversation, the argument is not that they exist and that makes the country good or bad or worth defending or not defending. The argument is, and we just had a report about this last week, that there is a lot of ambiguity about where the money is going. And the concern is arming these specific Nazis. In the same way that the United States, yes, we have Nazis and white supremacists, there is a robust conversation about whether or not there's a real problem with the number of white supremacists in our police force. That is absolutely a legitimate question to see. We had this conversation around 1-6. Is part of the reason why people were let into the Capitol because they had sympathetic people in the security team around the White House. That is absolutely a legitimate question to ask if our tax dollars, our weapons are going to people who don't have our interests at heart. That is the issue. And if you think the answer is no, fine, substantiate it, talk about it, engage with the issue and make your case. That's all I'm saying. This is not my area of expertise. I'm literally not even espousing a point of view. But I think the left is stronger when we're able to talk about these things instead of just assuming that people are secretly rooting for Vladimir Putin because they have a historical perspective or what's going on the ground.
Their reporting is wrong. Their reporting is lies. Okay, and then you make it 50-50. But Briahna, I don't know if you're doing it on purpose or not, but you did, what you just did there was a slide.
Also, I just wanted to say that, again, I've been critical of the Gray Zones coverage and stuff, but, Cenk is, he's also dabbled in reporting on the state propaganda and, basically just giving the American state media line. Think about the Russiagate era. TYT was literally MSNBC light for like 2 or 3 years. Cenk just doing a Rachel Maddow impression every single night, blowing up these bogus Russiagate allegations. And again, I am a critic of Vladimir Putin. I don't think anyone on the left should be sympathizing with or defending Vladimir Putin. But Cenk has also espoused lots of propaganda and uncritically, monetized it as well, which is exactly what he's accusing these guys of doing, just for a different government.
Yeah, and look, as much as I might agree with some of the criticisms of Cenk's, thoughts on the recent reporting that we've seen coming out from the people who I think are just too fucking sympathetic to the Russian government, that's fine. But the way that he goes about critiquing them here is like not going to convince anybody. Like it's again, not to beat a dead horse, but it's almost Trumpian. It's wrong, lies, bad. Like these are the words that he's using to refute reporting. That is not a substantive way to refute reporting. He was doing better at the beginning when he was like, we have a fucking small battalion in fucking Idaho, Wyoming, and wherever. Like, okay, but then hit them with the nuts and bolts, which I just don't think he has. I don't think he's prepared to articulate those things. Again, I think that's why he won't debate somebody like Aaron Matze, who I might disagree with on a number of issues, but you can't deny the guy doesn't do his homework. Yeah, I just think that he, even though I might be, again, sympathetic to this argument, he does a completely laughable job of trying to debunk it here. And you know, again, he's trying to talk about it to somebody. I don't think Briahna Joy Gray's ever written a fucking article about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia in her entire fucking career. Has maybe had guests on to have a more rounded out picture of what's happening, but this isn't her fucking forte. So the fact that he's trying to make it about this just shows that he can't win on whatever the fucking grounds that they were supposed to be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Mike H, for the $5. Gray Zone's coverage of Ukraine, Russia is complete trash, but Cenk is the wrong person to debate this issue. Too emotional, too personal. Yeah, that's basically what Zach just said as well. It's like, yeah, you're clearly not really making a solid counter argument. You're not really refuting anything. You're just saying, this is all a bunch of bullshit. This is all a bunch of lies. It's like, yeah, dude, but if you want to convince anyone, then you should probably come with a counter argument instead of just using ad hominems, essentially. But thank you so much, Mike. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike. Always good to see you in the chat. And Pedro the Lion, Cenk is such a child. Amen. Thank you for the 420. That's what I'm going to be trying to do later.
Yeah, thank you, Pedro. Really appreciate the 420.
A hand in that conversation. You started talking about how, oh, well, there's small faction Nazis, but I don't know, does the money go into Nazis? Maybe we don't send money to Ukraine. I'm worried about defense contractors just taking that money, and I'm worried. That's why I'm worried about the spending of the money. It's corporate pork, etc. Right? But maybe it's going to Nazis makes it seem like, hey, that's a 50-50 process. Well, and then you hold on. Then you said, well, hey, I'm concerned about cops and being far right and Nazis here in America in January 6th, as if I'm like, I'm not concerned about that. I'm also concerned about that. I don't know why did you bring that into a conversation about our disagreement?
You are seriously so oppositional. Every time I say something I believe, you interpret it as me saying you don't believe that. It's so weird. If I say my makeup brush is black, you're like, well, I also have a makeup brush. Dude, like, I'm not arguing with you. I'm trying so hard not to argue with you. Please stop trying to perceive every word out of my mouth as somehow a criticism of you or trying to undermine you. I'm sincerely.
By the way, it is very obvious that Cenk knows he's like grasping at straws here, that he's losing this debate in the face of someone who's just handling this masterfully and remaining very classy. This is the first time she's got it all emotional or animated, and it's just to point out what like how he's conducting himself and how unproductive this exchange has been because of his refusal to just argue with her on actual substance rather than bringing in all these other characters who he has personal animus towards and making this messy, dramatic episode instead of just trying to actually hash out their disagreements, which again is what we try to do when we have people on that we disagree with. Hopefully for the most part that works out. But I mean, you can just see the frustration in Cenk's face. I think he thought he was literally going to be debating someone with a lot weaker arguments, and he's realizing that his just aren't standing up to her.
Yeah, dude. I mean, gosh, this is rude to say, but it kind of reminds me of the end of our debate with Vosh. Shout out to you, Vosh. We're happy to come back on if you invite us. But towards the end, it just goes off the rails, and it's like, oh, are we going to argue about obscure World War II fucking decisions and hyper counterfactuals for a while? Like, it just seems like if you watch enough debates, people who are experienced on the mic, they basically filibuster, and they're like, well, how long until we get to an hour or 2 hours or whatever the fuck we agreed was when we're wrapping this shit, so I can be like, well, it looks like we're out of time, but god damn it, I had you on the ropes, Brie, or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, but again, it just seems like this interview is not quite gone how he was hoping. He seems like he's getting desperate. It seems like he's huffing and puffing, so to speak. But yeah, let's keep watching. This is almost done.
Trying to be here in the spirit of reparation. And it's
okay.
I don't necessarily feel from you right now that you have a desire to repair. It seems a little bit like point scoring. And that's, I don't know, it makes me a little sad. I don't see why there has to be this.
Look, all right, Briahna, let's go to something you did recently as an example, okay? And so you talk, and I think it's a good example. So you talked about how when Marjorie Taylor Greene says defund the FBI, hey, maybe that's not such a bad point, okay? So now that's a good place where, again, subtlety and nuance are gonna be really, really important, okay? So if I saw your segment where you were talking about, hey, look, the FBI has this terrible history of oppressing the powerless in favor of the powerful. That's totally true. We totally agree, okay? And if you're getting agreement from the right wing, now this is important, but in an earnest way, about police reform, law enforcement reform, what did we talk about? What did I say earlier? Take yes for an answer, right? So far, okay, that's good, agreed, right? But then I think it's incumbent to clarify, but the right wing doesn't actually mean it. It's not like you're gonna get Marjorie Taylor, hold on, let me finish and then you respond. It's not like you're gonna get Marjorie Taylor Greene to go, oh my God, you're so right. We should do police reform. These cops are being so abusive towards African Americans. No, what she's trying to say is if we get in charge, we're not gonna let them hold us accountable. We're gonna destroy rule of law by getting rid of anyone at the FBI who doesn't agree with us politically. Don't you see that?
So if you watch my clip, the first sentence and also the last paragraph is all about exactly that. So yeah, I agree.
Okay, great. But then I'm gonna show a clip, a tweet of Marjorie Taylor Greene agreeing with you, and then I wanna get your reaction to it. So I'm not doing this without you. We didn't do it on the show and go haha or anything like that. And in fact, I'm genuinely curious what your reaction to it. So let's look at that. So here, in response to you saying Marjorie Taylor Greene is right about the FBI, she says our government has become an institution that protects and serves the elites while the people suffer under the American last ruling class. We must defund the FBI, dismantle the Department of Justice, and gut the agencies of political biases and persecutions. I believe in the people. So what I see there, and I'm curious what you see, is her pretending that the right wing is populist and that they're doing this on behalf of the American people. When in reality, what she's saying is, if we get back in charge, there ain't gonna be no rule of law. We're gonna take out the Department of Justice, we're gonna take out the FBI, then they're gonna run roughshod. I do not agree to that at all. So I'm curious what your take on it is.
I think it's pretty funny since like thousands of leftists, she also seems to have not watched the video because I doubt that she would retweet a video where she was called a broken clock, who's only right twice a day, and a bad faith actor. So I am a co-host at Rising, and Rising's audience is a much more conservative audience than what you have here at TYT or what I have at Bad Faith. And when you're speaking to people who are not there for you, Robbie's been on the show much longer than I have, and the audience is largely there for him. They're very libertarian in their bent. They are anti-establishment. They're frustrated with corporate parties, but they've definitely leaned right, especially on cultural issues. I find that I'm able to get more engagement with the video and more engagement with my points that I think are substantive. I spent most of my video talking about communism. Now the FBI has been an enemy of the left. To meet them where they are and say, look, the left is as concerned, nay, more concerned about the issue than the right. And here's the real people who are advocating for this, and not in a self-interested way. And the point I make at the end of the video is, I don't believe Marjorie Taylor Greene is acting in good faith, but I believe you might be. And to the extent that you, the audience, is acting in good faith, here's what we should do: come over to the left. I'm addressing conservative audiences, or kind of partyless audiences, people who are quote unquote persuadable voters. I'm not doing this for Marjorie Taylor Greene's notice or interest. I'm doing because she is in fact obviously a bad faith actor, but you have to address the people who see her as acting in good faith. That's comms. Just because I know her and she's a bad actor, but some of the people in the audience are people who genuinely believe what she's saying. So the point is to say, okay, let me just accept on face value that you really are into this. Let me tell you who I really is, and let's develop a plan on my own turf about how to address this issue. I talked to the boys over at the Vanguard earlier today, and they raised some interesting points about how, like, well, if she is able.
Do you guys catch that? Shout it out. The Vanguard. First time we've ever been mentioned on TYT. I'm sure that got under Cenk's skin.
You pretend he doesn't know who she's talking about, though. We don't get a facial expression.
He does.
Oh, I know. I just wish we would have gotten a.
I wish you would have called us fake leftists too. That would have made us got us a lot of clicks. Cenk Uygur calls us fake left too.
Oh, well, the fire hose of the fake leftist accusation.
Yeah, but it is cool, and shout out to you, Brie, for referencing us and not being like, yeah, I talked to these other two dumbasses today, being like, oh, actually, we had a good conversation. So I do appreciate
Well,
that.
one of them was strapping and polite, but the other one was this major fucking rock in my shoe.
At the Vanguard earlier today, and they raised the turf about how to address this issue. I talked to the boys over at the Vanguard earlier today, and they raised some interesting points about how, like, well, if she is able to set the agenda, her version of getting rid of the FBI is going to be all about protecting, yes, elite power, the way that the FBI has always done, and avoiding accountability. I think that's a really legitimate point. That is why, instead of, I don't know, spending a long day attacking me on the internet, what I would love for leftists to be doing is to think critically and get our historians and our theorists together and think critically about what it would look like to either restructure or abolish the FBI, so that it really did become about accountability for elites instead of harassing leftists and other marginalized groups as it has done historically.
But Briahna, do you get that when at a moment when the FBI is finally doing something right and holding an elite like an ex-president accountable on his massive law breaking, that when you say Marjorie Taylor Greene is right, that it appears to some, I understand your point that you're making about reaching out to the right-wing audience that's watching. I totally get it. And from time to time, I think that makes sense politically, okay? But again, we need nuance here. But in this time, it allows them to say, you see that? Reasonable people on the left agree with us. The FBI is political, and they're targeting Donald Trump based on politics. That it seems.
I didn't say.
I know, and that's why I'm asking you about
Marjorie Taylor Greene in that tweet. When in Marjorie Taylor Greene's quote tweet, she doesn't even make that argument.
But you know that's the argument she's saying in this context. Well, she tweeted about how to defund the FBI right after the raid. You know that's what it's about. No, what I'm asking, Briahna, is do you see how it might be perceived as helping their talking point that the FBI is targeting Trump unfairly and for political reasons?
The right is exploiting this moment for what they want, and I'm exploiting this moment for what I want. That's all I can do. I, Briahna Joy Gray, with my small platform and 60,000 YouTube subscribers, are not platforming or influencing Marjorie Taylor Greene, a sitting congresswoman's behavior. I think that's laughable. But what I think is very irresponsible is for the left not to take advantage of the genuine interest that many people have across the political spectrum in holding the FBI accountable. Cops sometimes arrest bad guys and do the right thing. Sometimes cops stop a rape in progress and capture someone who's been drunk driving before they can hurt someone. Sometimes that happens. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue to advocate for overwhelming police reform, abolishment, or whatever it is, because that's the right thing to do. And we need to be coming up with structural alternatives to do the things that cops are supposed to be doing, while not covering for all of the misconduct and the structural problems with the police force just because sometimes they behave right. And I think the same thing with the FBI. It is completely cogent to say, I believe Donald Trump should be held accountable for whatever crime he might have committed. At the same time that you say, the organization that's undertaking the search has a credibility issue because it spent 85% of its resources, as I talk about in my clip, 85% of its time going after people like Muhammad Ali, Elvis Presley, and Martin Luther King and Fred Hampton, and only 15% of its time going after the Ku Klux Klan.
But today they're going after Donald.
Chad, I need you guys to sleuth it out. What the fuck did the CIA go after Elvis Presley for? I'm gonna have to DM Briahna Joy Gray. I'll probably just Google it myself later, but whatever, fuck. That was really interesting, but I do think that there is some there to what Briahna is saying, in the sense that while it's natural to have fucking skepticism, and obviously fucking Marjorie Taylor Greene is not ever acting in good faith. She's binary, pro-Trump, anti-Biden. There are still people in her in her world warp who could be convinced that, see how you feel like the FBI is corrupt in this instance? Well, here's like 10 million other instances where they're corrupt. Donald Trump did commit a crime, though. That's the elephant in the room. So I think that's where it starts to get a little crazy, right? With those people who are like, oh, your support for fucking defunding the FBI comes from the fact that they don't want Donald Trump to be fucking punished, when he very clearly committed crimes. So I don't know. I slightly disagree with that. I don't think it will get everybody as far, right? As soon as you draw that line in the sand where you're like, no, Trump deserves to go to jail, right? I think that would be a deal breaker with a lot of the people who are compelled by this new FBI defunding thing. But I also think that it's correct that she's not like platforming Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Like Marjorie Taylor Greene already has a platform. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. And thank you, Observer, for the $2 watch Bad Empanada's Debunking of Max. I've heard of Bad Empanada, but I'm not really familiar with the content of the channel. So yeah, I'll definitely check it out. But I cannot comment on the substance of that video. Do you know anything about Bad Empanada, Zach?
I'm looking at Bad Empanada right now to get an idea. Looks like it's is this like an essay channel? I think it is a video essay channel. Yeah. So yeah, I'll check it out. I see a picture of Vosh on their first video, so I don't know if that means that they're like either super pro or Vosh or critical of Vosh, but usually it means you're in one camp when you're on Twitch. So anyway, yeah, thank you for the $2, Bad Empanada. But yeah, getting to the end of this fucking conversation here, we've been reacting to it for like 2 hours, guys. LOL.
Yeah, I know this has been going on for so long. Sorry. Anyway, sorry. Thank you, Observer, for the $2, and thank you, No Bauhaus, for the $5. I get the hesitance to play into Russian talking points, but it's valid to be concerned about the long history and the current issue of Nazis in the Ukraine army. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I agree with that, and it is valid to talk about. It's just that when some people talk about it, they're clearly doing to feed into the Russian justification for their invasion of Ukraine. And it is true that, yeah, we have fucking Nazis in our military and our police force.
Yeah, what the fuck do you call a guy like Mike Pompeo or John Bolton, right? Like these are just U.S. fucking versions of Nazis, right? They have a very like fucking
or Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Or Marjorie Taylor Greene, exactly. What the fuck? So yeah, I mean, I 100%. It's not like Gavin and I reacted to a video from a couple of years back of what's his fuck Zelensky, when he was giving like an award speech and he's like making all kinds of jokes about how there are Nazis in the Ukrainian government. We're not here to deny that. But that is just far and fucking away not why Vladimir Putin wants anything to do with Ukraine. Like, yeah, that's not what his fucking concern is, guys. It's not.
Exactly. But thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate your perspective. No Bauhaus. And thank you also, Jane. Thank you so much for the $10. Love you guys. Time I gave you a super chat. Well, again, really appreciate that, Jane. Thank you so much. Cenk is the definition of Trumpian toxic masculinity. Everyone's just comparing everyone to Trump now. I guess that's just the thing. But you're not wrong. But Cenk is the definition of a Trumpian toxic masculinity: shouting, personal attacking, gaslighting, lying, bullying. Brie was all class and so smart. Yeah, I totally agree. This was a masterclass in how to handle yourself in an interview like this. Although, again, part of me does kind of wish she would just go full debate, bro. Like, just fucking meet these fuckers where they're at and bring that same energy. I'd like to see that, but obviously that's not really her thing.
Yeah, I think she just, has too much self-respect for that kind of, presenting of herself. But yeah, shout out to you, Jane. Yeah, I do hear what you're saying with the comparing it to Trump, even though, yeah, we kind of created a monster with that analogy, and not me, the fucking, everybody else over the past 10 years, or 5 years or whatever. But also, dude, Kemp Chalmers, what the fuck is the matter with you? MTG a MILF, though? Get your eyes checked. That's disgusting.
That is nasty.
Bro,
yeah,
she's not even hot. Like, I would give you another fucking Republican, maybe. Like, I guess I could see.
She literally looks like a Karen. Like, she's just like the definition of a Karen. So if you have like a Karen fetish, then maybe, but not for me, bro.
Bro, I mean, even like there are more attractive people. You could be like, fucking Tommy Loren, I guess, is like conventionally like white girl attractive, right? But like Marjorie Taylor Greene, bro, get the fuck away from me. I'm sorry.
Trump.
Not that your value is determined by...
then that gets to the issue of genuine, whether they're genuine or not. And I think this is...
Of course they're not. And I said that many times in my radar.
Okay, but let's break that down. And this is a good moment. This is a good thing to, I think, end on. So look, if I sense the right wing is genuine, they're actually voting with us. So for example, they're anti-war. They're saying the president needs to get congressional authorization, and they voted that way. Great. No problem. A vote's a vote. It's as genuine as it gets, right? So I say yes to that. But if they say, hey, Cenk, I care about law enforcement reform, right when Donald Trump's getting busted by law enforcement. And by the way, if we win, I'm not gonna do any of the reform you want. Instead, I'm gonna make it way worse. I go, well, that's not genuine. And this is not a moment that I wanna help them with their completely disingenuous concern about law enforcement.
I think that's an excellent point. You know how I would nail them on this? Wouldn't it be incredible if in response to this moment, the left actually drafted a plan that they could vote on to actually reform the FBI in a meaningful way? Wouldn't it be incredible if instead of letting Marjorie Taylor Greene stomp and posture on the internet about this sort of thing, that we called her bluff with a piece of legislation that would actually do what the left thinks would be a good response right now, a response that creates accountability for Donald Trump, but which also cuts at the meat of some of the skepticism that the right has about whether or not the FBI can conduct an impartial investigation. That's what I would really love to see in this moment. Call her to the mat, force the vote, make her prove whether or not she is a good faith actor or a bad faith actor. I think that would be much more productive in this context than sitting around just saying online she's a bad faith actor. Well, we all know that the people who support her or the people who are open to having this conversation, they don't know that. And there's only one way they can know that. It's by good faith actors getting in there and actually doing what we think should be done, instead of just criticizing and complaining and critiquing others.
Yeah, we have a slight difference on strategy there. I would not do that vote on the FBI now because it would distract everyone and make it seem like the FBI is doing a fraudulent investigation of Trump. But I would have done the same thing on election reform. When the Trump people screamed about election reform, progressives have wanted election reform forever. I would have done a bill that said, okay, great, you want election reform, let's do it, right? And I would have put them to a vote. But there, of course, we have the common opponent we always have, which is corporate Democrats. And they wouldn't allow those kind of real votes if their life depended on it. Okay, last thing on this then is, look, I get concerned that right-wing populism is given credibility when I think it's overwhelmingly disingenuous. So, I mean, I have that concern on a nuclear level with Glenn and the others, but I'm putting them aside. I'm taking you as a good faith actor here and say, aren't you worried that they're not at all populist? I mean, at the end of the day, Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, all these guys are talking about their favorite philosopher, Alexander Dugin in Russia, who believes in going back to the medieval ages, violence and dictatorship. Curtis Yarwin here in America, who believes in going to dictatorship and monarchies and ending democracy. That their populism isn't populism at all, and framing it that way is greatly counterproductive.
Of course, and I'll say this again. Nothing I ever say, nothing in my approach is ever intended to be directed at any of the people who are on TV screens or in Congress. I believe they're all bad faith actors. Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, all of them, right? But the people who like them and support them, some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of them are, some of them aren't. And my goal when I do radars, and often the theme of my radar is, hey, look at this right-wing populist saying X, Y, and Z. Here's why they're acting in bad faith and why you should be on the left. That is a common theme, not just in this radar, but if you go back through them, Rising has like a list of all of our radars on a row, so you can like go through all of Ryan's or all of Robbie's or all of mine or whatever, and look back through them. You know, I did the same thing around the Fourth Amendment, the case where Border Patrol agents are now able to search your house, and it's like implicates 85% of Americans because the borders most people live within a border. You know, I say, hey, look, you guys care about search and seizure. You guys care about your privacy rights. Don't you have a concern about this? And they're like, oh yeah, heck, conservatives talking about this. This is a big deal for me. So that's the thing that I do all the time, and it's because I'm not talking to Sam Alito. I'm not talking to Tucker Carlson. I'm trying to talk to people who have been fooled by these folks. And maybe you're of the belief that every single person who watches like Tucker Carlson's show is a deplorable and beyond the pale. And
no,
I respect that opinion. Okay, great. But my thought is it's the most popular TV show in America. And that gives me pause. And I'm trying to figure out why it is that people are attracted to him and take the parts of it out that are not fascistic and that are not racist and that are not bigoted, where he's diagnosing legitimate problems about America and has something about his approach that is galvanizing to people, and do that plus the good stuff. And explain to people, hey, like my Tucker Carlson radar that went viral because people kind of, I believe, purposely misunderstood it, is to say, I know what I see when I see Tucker. I see what you see. I see the bigotry. I see the open kind of white nationalism. But here's how he's subtle in his approach. Subtle enough, not to you and me, but subtle enough to the people who like him that he has plausible deniability. So let me explain it to you in a way that you can understand, because saying dog whistle, saying these terms that we understand and we believe in, many people on the right just don't. And if you look at the comments of that video, if you look at the comments of the Marjorie Taylor Greene video, you might be pleasantly surprised about how many people are like, oh, I hate Briahna. She's a communist, I hate her, but she makes a good point here. I can't disagree, this is an issue. And slowly but surely there are an increasing number of people who see the left as not just a bunch of crazy blue-haired freaks or whatever, not that there's anything wrong with blue hair, but as people who are legitimately engaging with issues that are priorities to them. That's my approach. I respect it if people don't like my approach or choose different approaches. I think a lot of different approaches work in this space. Different people need different things. All I want is the freedom to be able to do it without feeling like I'm fielding quite so much friendly fire from people that I prefer to be fighting alongside.
Yeah, so Briahna, super last thing, because that's a great thing to end on. Look, I think it looks like you and I agree that we need to try to pull a lot of the right wing to the left. And that's
AKA I lost.
I think that's fairly obvious. It's a good strategy. Corporate Democrats don't want to do it because they don't really care, because they're already on the right. Long story on that. But we agree on, let's pull them to the left, right? So, and on places where we agree, like for example, Article 5 convention, I agree with Louis Gohmert. Okay, if Louis Gohmert people want to come over, great. Come over and help us get money out of politics, okay? Now, he doesn't necessarily agree with that, but he agrees with the process of the convention. So we agree on that. What I'm worried about, and that's what I'm trying to understand, that's like maybe the unifying theme of this conversation, is that when people go on Tucker Carlson and they're not challenging him, all they're doing is agreeing, that it looks like they're trying to pull the left wing to the right and get them to agree to other Tucker Carlson positions, white nationalism, immigrants are dirty, they're gonna replace us, etc. And that they never clarify. And it looks to us, and that's why I called them the fake left. And I will, having had this nuanced, important conversation with you, I will take you out of that category. I understand you're trying to come at it from good faith. I will not take others that you take in good faith at all, and that's a fine and healthy disagreement. But the question is, I'm deeply concerned that they're helping the Tucker Carlsons of the world pull people on the left to the right wing.
So again, that was a pretty like casual, just admission that he's fucking wrong. Okay, I guess you're not a fake leftist. Well, isn't that the whole point of this conversation? You know, isn't that why this conversation is happening? So you just casually are like, yep, I guess you were right, and I was totally fucking wrong, and I miscategorized you in an attempt to group you in with other political enemies of mine. Sorry about that, but this was a great conversation, right? Like again, this is almost where I want Briahna to her claws to come out and be like, bro, then apologize to me. If I'm not fake left, then why did you call me that? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, this is about the time where Gavin would have. Are you fucking kidding me, dude? You know, Gavin always has the best explosions on our guests whenever they fucking step awry. I'm always like, oh, should I be rude? And Gavin's like, fuck you. I'm like, yeah, let's get into this shit. Like, you know, yeah. Also, shout out to you, Lance. For people who are familiar with Lance from the Surf Times, I saw you left a chat comment saying that, you know, obviously you disagree with Briahna Joy Grace framing on the Marjorie Taylor Greene issue. And I know that you're actually, I mean, you've engaged with Cenk before. So, you know, but yeah, I think that, you know, I appreciate, you know, your comment. And also I totally agree that even if you disagree with Brianna's take on MTG, you cannot come away from this thinking that Cenk looked like a good guy. He just was rude the entire time, right? I mean, he just treated her with utmost disrespect, plowed over her, talked over her, ignored every point that she made in order to bring it back to Jimmy Dore or Glenn Greenwald or Aaron Mate or the Gray Zone or some other fucking person that's not Briahna. It wasn't even like he was talking about The Intercept or something, like where she at least used to work. Like, no, just random fuckers that he doesn't like. So yeah, absolutely. And always cool to see that you're in the chat, Lance. Gotta chat sometime.
Yeah, appreciate it, Lance. Really, really cool to see you in our chat. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad you agree, man. I'm glad you agree about Cenk's performance here, and that we're not just wearing our, you know, blinders or whatever. But yeah,
and the simp guard, lol.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Lance. Appreciate that. Thank you also, Jane. Beyond Bree's debating masterclass, she offers actual pathways for the left. Developing defund reform FBI bill, Bree for POTUS one day. Love watching you from Sydney, Australia. Keep it up. Yeah, that I mean, yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think that you know, while I you know, I'm actually sympathetic to the point that Cenk made, where it's like, okay, you're going to lose all of those MTG people as soon as you start telling them that you actually agree that Trump committed crimes, which is indisputable, guys. Anybody that tells you that Trump is like innocent and this is a fucking like, you know, witch hunt or whatever, they're lying to you through their fucking teeth. Go like find out what happens to if you steal classified documents. Oh, go ask Edward Snowden or Julian Assange, right? Like they don't get fucking treated. I mean, he's literally violated the Espionage Act potentially. So anyway, crazy shit from Donald Trump. And I do agree that with Cenk's point that you're probably going to lose a lot of the, not just the obvious, you know, congressional support from the right, but the actual base of the right as soon as they realize you want to reform the FBI and then still go after their guy. And also, Lance, wasn't trying to put you on blast. I was mostly just stoked you were in the chat. My, you know,
we're
all
putting
love
you
from the Vanguard.
We're putting you on Baja Blast, Lance. But anyway, thank you so much, Jane. We really appreciate that. And so glad to hear that you're a fan of our show and that you love watching. That's cool that you're watching from Australia as well. We don't usually hear from people down under. So that's really cool to see you in our audience. Thanks again for tuning in. And thank you so much for the super chats.
Yeah,
really
absolutely. Love it when people tune in from down under, eh? What a...
Crocodile Dundee and shit. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Jane. Appreciate that. And appreciate you, Mari Posa. Cenk is holding a grudge. Bree did great. Yeah, totally agree. Thank you so much, Mari Posa. Really appreciate that.
Completely based.
And thank you, Boeing 757 pilot. Once again, really appreciate seeing you in the chat, man. Cenk, Bree just stomped my guts out, so I need to save myself. Also, now is not the time for force the vote, not the time to defund FBI. Sorry, no time is the best time. If the door cracks open, throw it open. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. And again, I mean, I laid out my criticisms of Bree's framing of the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing. I think she maybe should have explained more what would actually happen if Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene take power, and why they want to get rid of the FBI. It's not for the same reasons as us, and we shouldn't pretend in any way that they're our allies. But yeah, I think you're basically on point, Boeing, and thank you once again for the super chat.
Yeah, always great to see you, Boeing 757. Yeah, I mean, look, Gavin and I were ardent supporters of force the vote back in the day, and we had a very similar logic to you. You know, if the door's not open, bust it fucking down, let's go. So anyway, thank you. And yeah, obviously we thought Cenk mauled it the whole time. That's why we made like 2 hours and 30 minutes worth of commentary dunking on him relentlessly.
Yeah, exactly. So this is basically over, but let's finish it out.
Are you not concerned about that?
Yeah, sometimes. And I spoke to Glenn directly about it on my show with Nathan Robinson, and we had a good conversation about it. And he acknowledged that he could do more to push back and to make his own positions clear. That was, about a year ago, not quite. And I think it's probably worth revisiting the conversation with him. And so I'll shoot him an email after I get off of here. And I invite you to that conversation if you're interested.
No, I'm not, because I don't think he's in good faith at all. So in that year, I mean, Briahna, look at the evidence. I know you say you're trying to get along with everybody, but evidence matters. You had that conversation a year ago, and since then, all he's done is pro Tucker Carlson, pro Alex Jones propaganda, and he has not pulled them 1 inch to the left. Whoever thought he was on the left, he has helped pull them to Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones, and that's not productive. That's not left wing.
I know, it's interesting. So Glenn in particular has never identified as a leftist. So I don't know that he necessarily has an audience. I mean, I think a lot of us on the left really respect his advocacy for, Julian Assange and some of these kind of a speech and First Amendment journalist type issues. I mean, he has a First Amendment lawyer, and that's his area of expertise. But he's never broadly described himself as like a leftist or a socialist or anything like that. So to the extent that he had a left audience that he's pulling right, I'm a little skeptical of that claim. Although, I agree with some others. Like I haven't listened to the Alex Jones interview. I saw some commentary about it. I don't love the idea of, I should say this. I don't see the utility necessarily in engaging with someone like Alex Jones. He's not in a position of power in terms of making policy or really directing the Republican Party. I understand he has a huge audience, so there's always some utility in getting your ideas out on a large audience. But but I have read some of the criticisms of how that interview went, and I look forward to talking to Glenn about them. But what I don't think is productive. I'm sorry, like I don't expect other people to feel this way, but I do not have a close relationship with Jimmy, although I appreciated his advocacy around force the vote, and I believe he really deeply cared about that. I do have a personal relationship with Glenn, so I would prefer to have my conversation with him one-on-one before I make commentary about an interview, which also I haven't even watched or listened to yet.
No, that part is
right
totally
there.
fair.
That's exactly the kind of courtesy that Cenk Uygur would not extend to any of those gentlemen. She lays out and this is exactly what we've always said and exactly how we've always walked our walk, right? Like, fuck, if we don't agree with Glenn on everything, Jesus Christ, I would never interview Alex Jones if you had my fucking nuts on fire. Like, Jesus Christ, I would never do that. And if I did, it would not go the same way. But I don't have to talk shit on Glenn for that. The next time I see him, I'll be like, dog, what is going on with this Alex Jones thing? Like, we can talk about that. That will be a good, 30-minute clip. And Cenk has just decided that it's, he's above anybody that he disagrees with, and it's only his job to rain fury and condescension down on.
Yeah, and even when we are critical of Glenn Greenwald on our show, to his credit, he welcomes the criticism. I mean, maybe he doesn't respond that way to everyone, but when we criticize him on our show, he says that's part of the reason why he likes watching us. He's like, I like the fact that you guys aren't afraid to criticize people that go on your show and that are friends of the show. You don't have favorites. You're not playing for a team. You'll criticize everyone, and you'll also give credit to everyone. And that's our ethos here at the Vanguard. And yeah, it is pretty hypocritical of Cenk to talk all this shit. Scold Briahna Joy Gray for guilt by association, and then be like, well, what do you want me to actually talk to him? No, I'm not going to fucking debate the guy. So anyway.
But you have seen in the last year, he hasn't pulled one person to the left, and all he's done is agree with the right wing. But
I don't know. There's been some pretty good clips about issues like Julian Assange that regularly happen on Fox News now.
Yeah.
And what I like for a lot of the ones that I've seen to go a little bit differently and for him to push back a little bit more on Tucker Carlson, absolutely. And I've said that to him. But I don't know. I would have to comb through all of the content with a finer tooth comb to make a claim about whether or not it's more helpful than not.
Yeah. And so, of course, I agree with him on Julian Assange. But that's exactly my point. Trump was in charge for 4 years, and he didn't do anything about Julian Assange because all their populism is fake. The only thing he did was pass a $2 trillion tax cut for the rich. Well,
somebody made the point to me today, and I don't know if it's actually true, but somebody said that Marjorie Taylor Greene was in fact critical of the treatment of Assange while Trump was still in office. And it's interesting. It's interesting whether or not this is a question, right? Are they going to keep these stances up when their person is in power? I think it might be easier to say yes with something like Assange than something like the FBI. I think that's probably the case. But I think it's our job again to not just have speculation, but to create conditions where we can prove that by forcing the vote on a bill, let's say, about FBI reform or abolishment and things like that. And I look forward, now that we've had this conversation, to people on the left who have much more knowledge and policy knowledge and stuff than I, to maybe start pursuing something like that.
All right, Briahna Joy Gray, host of Bad Faith podcast. She's co-host on The Rising. She's host of the Debrief on Call-In. Thank you for joining us and having this important conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cenk. I appreciate it. I look forward to hosting with Bad Faith someday.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, Thanks Cenk, for watching. You better fucking come on the Bad Faith. I want to see that conversation, even if it's not with Glenn Greenwald. This conversation, clearly, there's a lot more left to go. They covered a lot, but now I would like to see it on Briahna's turf, on her terms, with her asking the questions. Because let's be honest, guys, Cenk has some stuff to answer for too. Cenk has some stuff to answer for too. Obviously, it's not fair to say he's taking money from the CIA or whatever he was accusing Jimmy Dore of saying. But it is worth asking him about. It is worth questioning the money that TYT took. Not because I think it's from the fucking CIA or whatever, but just because, again, TYT constantly talks about the corrupting influence of corporate money when it comes to politicians. And obviously, a lot of people have wondered, since they took a lot of corporate money, why their show has changed to the extent that it has. So I would love to see that conversation. I want to see Cenk grilled by someone like Briahna Joy Gray when it comes to his hypocrisy on taking corporate money. Also, let's not pretend like you didn't try to bust the union at TYT, bro. Luckily, they succeeded and they unionized anyway. But again, in the same way that you call Briahna Joy Gray a fake leftist for associating with Glenn Greenwald, lots of people call you a fake leftist for trying to bust a union. So, do you not have to answer for that? Do you not have to fucking answer for your sins, motherfucker? Because again, half the people in our fucking audience think you're a fake leftist. So anyway, I would like to see this conversation continue again on Briahna's turf and on her terms, with her asking the questions. But with all that said, and even with all of our criticisms of Cenk Uygur, I do still have to say I'm glad this conversation happened. As unproductive as it was often, I still think overall it was a good thing that it happened. It was definitely lively and entertaining. So I enjoyed that just from a personal perspective. And can you please mute yourself?
Oh shit.
And I'm like I said, I enjoyed watching it, even though Briahna was the clear victor. I'm glad she had the opportunity to assert her intellectual dominance over Cenk.
Oh yeah, look, Cenk, the only credit he deserves is for going through with this, I guess, and actually fucking having this conversation. But yeah, I thought he looked terrible for at least the first 30 minutes, and 35 minutes just came across like an ogre, like a fucking mean person, like he was there to try and put her in a chokehold and just, I don't know what the fuck he thought he was going to do. At the end of it, he starts to come around because I think he just realizes that that's going to be totally unsuccessful, and that she's able to remain calm, and that she's able to kind of dismantle all of the mud or the bombs that he heaves at her, or whatever the fuck the terminology I'm looking for is. But she just remained composed. She made him look like he was definitely in the wrong optically, And but yeah, would love to see a more good faith conversation over on the Bad Faith pod. I think that Brie does a really, really excellent job of coaxing disagreement out of the people that she's interviewing. So I think it might be a little more fruitful, a little less vindictive and petty and petulant. But overall, like you said, Gavin, I'm happy it happened. We just reacted to it for 2.5 hours. There was a lot of good stuff to extrapolate from.
Yeah, and we are getting a little bit tired, guys. We've been going on for 2.5 hours, so we're going to briefly cover the Nomiki Konst story, because we've been, covering that so doggedly over the last couple months. We wanted to, discuss that a little bit, but we are probably going to have to get out of here soon, just because, again, we spent the whole day on the road today on the way back from Minneapolis. We're a little bit tired, and we've been going for like twice as long as we normally do. But yeah, let's quickly discuss this as well. And again, thank you everyone so much for the super chats today, for tuning in general, for hitting that like button. We really appreciate you guys, and it's always great to come back from a road trip and see that you guys are still fucking with us, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And shout out to you, Jamie. You don't have to be embarrassed that you used to watch TYT. That's how a lot of people got brought to this fucking movement. You know, there's no shame in, you know, ever being introduced to, you know, content and, you know, making your own fucking opinions. A lot of people watch TYT.
Also, TYT used to actually be worth watching. Like, it genuinely did used to be worth watching. Back when Jimmy Dore was on the panel and there was actually more of a intellectual diversity, you know, there was more like interesting debates and discussions. And again, it had more personality. It wasn't so watered down. Yeah, it used to be a way freaking better show. It used to be like genuinely worth watching. I really genuinely enjoyed it. And now it's just a shadow of its former self. It totally fucking sucks these days. You know, at least like 9 out of 10 times that I tune in. Sometimes I'll catch him on a good rant. Like, for example, we reacted to that debate that Cenk and Anna had about the Polish LARPers playing Americans. That was a good discussion, but they're few and far between these days. And these days it's usually just pretty low effort, in my opinion. And also all these weird, uncharismatic hosts that I don't care to hear from and that have nothing interesting to contribute to any given conversation. But anyway, we did want to talk about this briefly. We've talked a lot about the Nomiki Konst candidacy for New York State Senate 55, 59. I'm getting tired, like I said. But it does look like Nomiki has officially dropped out and endorsed Kristen Gonzalez, which is what she should have done a long time ago. But I guess credit where credit is due. Got to give credit to Nomiki Konst for dropping out and doing the right thing, endorsing the actual leftist candidate in this race. Hopefully that'll be enough. Hopefully it's not too little too late and Gonzalez wins. Nomiki will still be on the ballot. So technically she could still split the vote, which is funny. But I doubt that will happen. I imagine she'll get less than 1%. But yeah, hopefully Gonzalez wins. Again, credit where it's due, although this whole thing was just a massive exercise in narcissism and ego from the jump. But again, don't just want to take, you know, you got to give credit where it's due, even if you're not a huge fan of the person involved.
Oh, 100%. Look, we said on a stream maybe, 3 weeks ago when we were first fucking covering this, we said, hey, this is dog shit. This is horrible. This is hypocritical massively. This is a vanity project. It's an ego contest. You're from Arizona anyway. Stop pretending that you're from Queens or whatever. It's so obvious when anybody looks at you. That'd be like me fucking moving to Chicago when I'm 18 and then I'm from Chicago. I love Portillo's and you know, whatever the fuck. Like I like, you know what I mean? Like, no, that's not how it works. Like you can still run for somewhere even if you're not from there. But anyway, all of that happened. She debased herself massively. She kind of fumbled any kind of remaining sympathies that she had, even with the Majority Report listeners. I mean, Emma Vigilant and Matt Lech were consistently just like kind of raking him over the coals, and Sam Cedar even realized how unpopular his decision to be. So he all but walked it back during that long clip we reacted to here. But with all that being said, we said if Nomiki drops out of the race, we're going to welcome her with open arms and say you did the right thing. You know, we're not going to hold this over your head. So you know what? You know, let's wipe the slate clean. Yeah, I'm not going to go to fucking Nomiki for my fucking analysis, but you know, I don't need to spend any more time dunking on her or dogging on her. Like she did the right thing. She can go fucking get out of the public hair for a little bit and, you know, lick her wounds. Cause I imagine this is also really embarrassing for her.
Oh, it's definitely massively embarrassing. And even though she did drop out, it's still going to be a stain on her reputation going forward. Not just because she ran, again, that's her right to do, but the way she conducted herself during the race by going full Karen, as we reported on during that debate, by constantly accusing Kristen Gonzalez supporters of being rude to her and basically playing into the whole Bernie bro argument that Hillary and other corporate Democrats used against Bernie Sanders. She constantly, you know, leaned into those kind of talking points. It was really disappointing to see her punching left rather than attacking the corporate, you know, pro-developer candidate that was mired in corporate money. So that was super disappointing, and people aren't going to forget that, nor should they. And again, even though we're being the bigger people here and saying that, you know, the slate is clean, we're going to give you credit where it's due. Unfortunately, I don't think Nomiki feels the same way about the Vanguard. Because what were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say, we made it so long. We made it so long with Nomiki, just like, oh, we can just scroll her feed from the Vanguard as we make these fucking, like, just savage videos about her campaign, dude. And And I think what really got her attention was she like sent us a fundraising DM because we followed her on Twitter and she followed us. And Gavin was like, LOL, thanks for the reminder to fucking donate to Christian Gonzalez or whatever the fuck it ended up being, right? And then I imagine she saw that and was like, fuck you guys forever, which is fine. I don't really care. Yeah, there we go. No, LOL, Nomiki Konst unfollowed us after we responded to this DM. I will donate to Christian Gonzalez. Thanks. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that is what it is. That is Nomiki Konst, and now she's blocked us, and I think that she'll have to block the rest of the internet too. But anyway, no. Yeah, I'm also getting tired. Fuck me.
Yeah, we had a long day. We had a long weekend, a great weekend, which we'll tell you guys a little bit about in a second here. But thank you so much, Bruce, for the 199. Yo, shout out from Minneapolis. Thank you, Bruce. Great town you live in. We really enjoyed our time there. We were kind of on the outskirts of Minneapolis, but still beautiful area. The weather was awesome. We had a really, really fun time. And thank you so much for the super chat.
Dude, the weather was fucking incredible, man. Like the summer times in Minneapolis, it was like 68, fucking cool, but you could still be in a short sleeve shirt. Oh, man. You know, this is the weather guard, but we love that fucking good weather. And there was awesome weather up in Minneapolis.
Also, as Rebel K says, please hit that like button, guys. We'd really appreciate if you hit that like button. It's not just to satisfy our egos. It's actually to help us boost the stream and the algorithm so more people see our content. We really appreciate it if you wouldn't mind just hitting that like. It's 100% free and super easy. But thank you so much, Rebel, for that. And thank you also, Christopher Loud, for the $50. We really appreciate that generous donation, Christopher. Thank you so much. Just got a 100K raise doing what I love. Happy to spread the love to streamers who make my life better. Wow. Well, what a great message. Thank you so much, Christopher, and congratulations also, not just for getting the raise, but for, you know, doing what you love. As people that also are fortunate enough to do what we love as an occupation. Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, what the fuck did you get 100K raise doing though? Are you like a fucking designing cars? Do you fucking buying building? I'm not hating at all, Jesus Christ, but I think in the last 5 years I haven't made $100,000 anyway. No, good for you, Christopher Loud. Thank you for being a comrade and sharing some of that with us. Clearly, you're a very bright person. You're making fat stacks, and I like the picture of your dog. And you're a fucking
yeah. I'm gonna imagine whatever Christopher does is requires a lot more skill and intellect than what we do. But yeah, thank you so much, Christopher. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, the last thing we wanted to briefly talk about is, you know, we discussed and told you guys we were just in Minneapolis, and you guys know that we've been working on our van documentary, the first one of them. So I guess we can just take the opportunity to announce what that will be. Over the weekend, we did have the great pleasure of hanging out with and interviewing former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura, as well as his son Tyrell Ventura, who's a great friend of our show and a great personal friend in general. So, you know, there's the photo we posted to Twitter. In case any of you guys haven't already, make sure to follow us on Twitter for updates like this one. But yeah, it was a great time. It was a great interview. I'm so excited to share with you guys. And it's not just a normal interview. It's going to be a whole, a mini documentary, a short documentary. Our first one is going to be a short documentary about Governor Ventura's election as a third-party candidate, how he pulled it off, you know, what the context of the race was, what the situation is, and how it could potentially be repeated going forward. So we're really excited to share that with you guys. We got some amazing footage in Minnesota. And again, that's our first documentary that's going to be coming out later this month about the unprecedented third-party victory that occurred in Minnesota, thanks to former Governor Jesse Ventura. Can't wait to share it with you guys. But what would you like to add to that?
Oh, well, we've got one with the main nuts and bolts shot. We've got another one where we've already shot nuts and bolts. Not ready to reveal that one now, but there is going to be consistent content in the documentary game. Short video essay, doc style, whatever. That's what we're doing. When Gavin and I hatched the idea for the Vanguard, you know, we were not talking about like Marxist-Leninism conversation Vanguard. We just wanted to make about cool shit potentially down the road someday. And obviously we've been massively happy with the show that we've created, and, you know, not going to change anything on that front, but super excited to be able to add a whole nother layer to the kind of content that we're bringing you guys. We've been talking about it for a long time. Yeah, Gavin's way fucking taller than me. Now you guys can all be like, oh yeah, see, why does Zach always bitch about being short anyway? Gavin knows that's my trigger.
The reason I look this tall is because I was the one taking the photo and I was holding it up. But I'm like, I think like 6'2", 6'3". I'm not quite 6'5". And Zach's not even that short. It's just that I'm kind of a tall motherfucker. But yeah, no, it was awesome.
Yeah, Jesse's 6'4". His son Tyrell actually is like 6'6", which is crazy when you stand next to all of them. I just go, wow, I'm, you know, anyway. But got a lot of great content coming. It obviously took us a long time to get here, but now that we're here, the train has picked up momentum. We are going to be putting shit out for you guys. And of course, we're still going to be here live streaming, but it's going to be a new dynamic to the show. We hope it adds a layer of credibility to us. We're going out here, we're doing these things. We are fucking putting our money where our mouth is, literally. Because if this all blows up in our face, that'll be a massive financial bummer, but we move on. But yeah, so just keep fucking paying attention, keep that subscribe button going, the notification bell, be on the lookout for real in-depth conversation. And yeah, so anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. We're so excited to share this content with you. And again, it's not just an interview that we're going to be uploading. It's going to be a full documentary with archival footage, historical footage, news footage, other stuff like that too. So it's going to be a full presentation. We're putting a lot of work into this stuff. So we hope you guys watch it. I know it's not as sexy as some of the dramatic content we do with the clickbaity headlines and stuff, but we really hope that you guys actually find some value in this work that we're creating, in these little documentaries that we're going to be putting out. Because again, these are real passion projects of ours. We're hoping to, talk about important issues such as third-party victories, populist movements. We have another couple docs in the work that, again, we don't want to spill the beans on, but that we're also making progress on as well. And what the fuck? Purple Doritos do not suck. Purple Doritos are the fucking best Doritos. Maybe the only really truly great Doritos. But anyway, that's a whole nother fucking debate for another day. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Really appreciate it. Sounds like a lot of you guys really enjoyed our stream. So thank you so much for tuning in. We're glad to give you a couple hours of entertainment, almost 3 hours of entertainment. So yeah.
Yep, ready to chill out for the rest of the evening. But I think we're going to come back tomorrow, give you guys that Kyle versus Vosh beef analysis and all that other good stuff. And we'll be back, here over the next week, back in our regular studio, back in our normal everyday grind, back in our everyday bullshit. And super excited to do that. And thank you for everybody that was in the chat today. Always great when we have a large group of you all talking along, building the Vanguard community. As Gavin and I always say, we're super stoked with where this show has gone, with the community that we've developed. Gavin and I just come up here, we say exactly what the fuck we think, and you guys are always cool. We have thoughtful debates and discussions and all that. And anyway, shout out to you guys.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being our loyal listeners. We so appreciate you. We wouldn't be able to do the show without you. There would be no show without you. It would just be Zach and I ranting at each other in an empty room. So yeah, you guys make the show what it is. And also huge shout out once again to you, Christopher, for the $5. Not trying to buy my way onto the show. And this is the same comrade that got the raise and threw us $50. So we really appreciate that once again. But yeah, not trying to buy my way onto the show. But if you ever want to talk about housing with the housing attorney, would love to chat. Hell yeah, Christopher, send us a DM on Twitter or something. And regardless of the super chats, that sounds like it might be an interesting conversation. So yeah, feel free to shoot us a message and we might be able to get something scheduled in that regard. And again, that sounds like you're probably doing really cool, really important work. So, huge credit, huge kudos to you. And I'm glad you got that raise, buddy.
Yeah, shout out to you, Christopher Loud. I hope that's a homage to what you're smoking. I'm kidding, of course. But yeah, shout out to you. If you ever want to come on and talk about housing, we can probably work something out. There's a lot of fucked up housing policy that we could sift through if somebody knows what the hell they're doing. So shout out to you, Christopher. And I think we have one more super chat from Mike 8. Great work, guys. Keep it up. Shout out to you, Mike. Yeah. Good homie Mike, always in the chat. What's up? But I guess we can get the fuck out of here. Tell everybody that we love them, that the patrons make our wheels on the van go round and round. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You know what to do. Yeah, I guess we'll throw up that Patreon board. And then unless you have anything to add, Gavin, we will tell everybody we love.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for the support on Patreon. We really, truly appreciate that. As we were just saying, the documentaries we're producing, the on-the-ground content we're producing, that's all made possible by the support on Patreon. So we really appreciate that. It's more important now than ever as we're, taking to the streets to make these documentary films. Again, we really hope you guys enjoy them. We really hope you guys check them out. But yeah, thank you so much to the Patreon community. We genuinely appreciate your support. And if you're interested in joining the Patreon community, having your name up here on the shout out screen, getting access to our Discord community and the other benefits we offer our patrons, then hit up that link. It's in the description. Like I said, we'd really appreciate it. It really helps out. But if you're not able to, please don't feel bad. We 100% understand. All that we ask is that you hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. And speaking of subscribers. Once again, pretty cool that we achieved 27,000 today, 27 and 25. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate that. And do you have anything else to say, Zach?
No, just fucking, we've got a lot of cool shit coming, guys. We're working and grinding, but tonight we're going to take the rest of the evening off and chill. Peace out, everybody.
Yeah, peace, guys. Have a great rest of your night.